Hi, this is John Delancey, and you are listening to the Geekcast Radio Network.
Today on Weekend at the Movies, will there only be 5 Best Picture nominees next year at the Oscars? Is Netflix changing the movie game? And our first list of our first half decade countdowns as we go through our top 10 science fiction and fantasy films of the last 5 years. All that and more coming up on Weekend at the Movies. All right, thanks for joining us today at Weekend at the Movies for a special episode where we are beginning our journey that we're taking in 2015 of doing a whole bunch of look backs at the half decade. So 2010 through 2014, we're going to be counting down some different things throughout the course of 2015. We're starting today with science fiction and fantasy films. We will have a bunch of other genres. We're going to go through animated films, comic book films, some obviously the standards, drama, action, comedy. And then we are going to end the year by going through our top actors of the half-decade, our top actresses of the half-decade, and then a two-parter as we count down the top 50 films of the decade so far. So that's what we're going to be doing throughout 2015, and we're kicking it off today. And for each one of these episodes, we're going to be bringing on some special guests to help us count these things down. So I'll just kind of introduce the panel for us today. Obviously, I'm here. Movie Revolt Dan is here. Hello, Dan.
Hey, how's it going?
Matt Fridley is here. Hello.
Hey.
And joining us from the True Bromance podcast is Hyro. Hello, Hyro.
What's up, fellas?
Not much. Glad to have you on here. I believe this is the first time you've been on this version of the show.
Yes, this is my first time go.
So it's a good one to be on. So I am very much looking forward to this conversation that we get to once we get to our top 10 list, because I've listened to a lot of True Bromance episodes. Obviously, Dan and I have recorded quite a few episodes together, and we know each other's movies taste somewhat. And I also know some of Matt's interests, and you guys aren't all aware of each other's interests, but we're gonna have some differences, I guarantee, as we go through this list. And it's going to be interesting to see as Dan and Hyro go at it, as me and Dan go at it, as we're all going to have different things where we're going to disagree big time. But it should be a fun conversation along the way. Before we get into any of that, let's just go quickly around the table here as far as what we've seen this week. Hyro, I understand you guys do this on your podcast, so if you want to save some of those for your own podcast, I totally understand. But I'll let you make that decision. But Dan,
is that your way of just cutting me off and like, look, Hyro,
no,
we really don't want you to speak too much.
No, I'd love you to speak, but I don't want to try to steal your guys' thunder, since I know we have a similar segment in that.
No worries, man. I'm going to be watching tons of movies anyways. My wife's going out of town, so I'll be having a shit ton of movies to talk about. Oh, by the way, can I curse? I forgot.
Yes.
Oh, okay,
yes,
cool, awesome. Sure.
All right, so we'll start with Dan. How's your week been going, and have you seen any movies in the last week?
Week's going good. Actually, it was off work today because we got a good 10 inches of snow, so got to
won't stop.
Yeah, I know. It's like this. It's like the Rocky. Right when you think it's dead, it just comes back to life again. But yeah, so I did get to watch a few movies. I was kind of worried because didn't have much, but I'll just briefly touch about some stuff I did get to see. And the first being a documentary from last year that I missed that's finally available on Netflix, and that's The Overnighters. I don't know if you guys know about this, but it's on Netflix, and it's about this town, North Dakota, where jobs are kind of exploded because of different mining and fracking and things like that, and it's caused this huge flood of people, kind of like an upgraded version of Grapes of Wrath in a lot of ways, to come seeking jobs because they're available, but there's a lot of jobs, but not a lot of places to stay. So this guy in The Overnighters, he runs this church, and he ends up kind of designing this program where guys and men can sleep in his church and sleep in his parking lot overnight because there's nowhere to stay, because the rent's like ridiculously expensive, and they're not really building anything because they feel like the jobs aren't there to last, so they don't want to build homes that will just kind of go away. And they have all these ordinances where you can't have RVs, so it's really difficult to find a place to stay, and people are just coming here because they have nowhere place else to go. So it kind of chronicles this guy in this program. What becomes rather interesting is that a lot of the people he brings in, they come from questionable pasts. Like, some have felonies, some maybe even sexual offenders. And at one point, he brings a guy into his home, and it kind of goes on. There's a huge kind of outlash with the community there. They don't really want those people staying. They feel it's dangerous, and it's rather interesting because it doesn't really get in politics at all. It's just a really human story, and it's really a difficult story too, where there's no right or wrong answers, and it gets a couple of twists and turns just the right amount where it kind of makes you think, okay, I'm rooting for this guy. He's clearly making the right decision here, but then you're like, oh, maybe he's really being selfish, and maybe this isn't smart. So it's a really good documentary. I actually really loved it a lot. It's like it has everything I like in a good doc, and which sounds disgusting. I didn't mean it that way, but I would highly recommend it. Probably would have made my top 10 of documentaries of 2014 if I saw it in time. Probably my top 5. I still like Rich Hill and 12 O'Clock Boys more, but it's quite good.
Awesome.
And I did watch Big Hero 6. Not much to say about it except for I don't mind that it won the Oscar. It's not good as Lego Movie, but I don't think it's remarkably that much worse than How to Train Your Dragon 2. I think they're pretty on par with one another. Great animation.
The others? Did you get to see like the Princess Kaguya and any of those other ones?
I have not seen those others, or Song of the Sea. But when compared to How to Train Your Dragon 2, I think How to Train Your Dragon 2 is better, but I like the animation in Big Hero 6 more. The Big Hero 6 kind of has its story is pretty generic, but Baymax is a really cool character, so that's pretty awesome.
I've literally made 3 trips to Redbox now to try to get Big Hero 6, and I've had no luck. So maybe next week.
Just buy it; it's worth it.
Yeah. It's I have a little bit of time. We're not to our animated list yet, so I've got to make sure I've seen it before that. But
that's kind of why I watched my next movie, which was The Rin Rises. Which, because I was trying to think ahead and get up to the animated list once we get there, and I'll save that because we might talk about that later on. But
right.
I enjoyed it. It's not my favorite Studio Ghibli film. It's kind of weird because it's like a biopic animated film, which is different. You know, you're expecting kind of like monsters and more unique designs when it comes to Studio Ghibli, but it's really like a straightforward drama, and that's pretty much. Oh, and the last thing I saw was this weird movie on Netflix called Parallels, which is I watched because it was one science fiction film from this last decade, which I haven't seen. It came out last year, and no one was talking about it. And there's good reason why it's not very good. So, great idea. It's this like idea where there's parallel Earths. They go in this building and they come out and they're like in this different Earth. I love parallel universe stories, but it's an interesting concept. It's just really nothing new, and I think its grasp and reach don't really line up very well, but it's worth a watch if you're bored on Netflix. So there's worse things out there, I guess.
That's a ringing endorsement. There's worse things out there.
There's always worse things you could watch.
It's better than kicking a puppy, I guess, if you could say.
Oh.
They should put it on the cover art, like right there. 2 thumbs up.
From Movie Revolt Dan, better than kicking a
Yeah. You would not make a dog cry watching this movie. No, so.
I'm going to mention 2 films that I saw because I'm not going to comment on the other 3 I saw. I was trying to do some research for the list this week. A couple of films that I hadn't seen that I thought I should see before we made our list, and then a couple I wanted to just revisit to have more fresh in my mind, so I wasn't just basing it off of 5-year-old memories. So I did see. I watched In Time, Inception, and Source Code, but I'm not gonna say anything about those just in case they may or may not show up on my list. But the 2 that I will talk about that I did see from 2014, still trying to catch up on everything. I saw Foxcatcher and Whiplash. So finally knocked those 2 off of my list. Let's start with Foxcatcher. I know some people loved it and some people kind of had mixed reviews on it. I guess I don't understand the hype on Foxcatcher. My disappointment there is that I think it had the potential to be a really cool, intriguing story. I think the situation that it's based off of is so bizarre, and the people involved are so bizarre that I think it could have made a very interesting story. I just don't think Bennett Millard was the right guy to helm that one. I don't know. I question a lot of his choices, so that one kind of fell flat with me. But Whiplash, Dan, that's my number 1 film of 2014.
Nice.
Excellent. It's a really good choice.
So, yeah, I mean, I've been searching for something that kind of blew me away, and that one, my girlfriend's not going to like that I said that because she did not really enjoy this film at all.
Yeah, I've not met one person that did not like that movie. Wow.
But I mean, there was just so many things that I related to, and there's so many different ways, so many different things that you can take away from that movie. and I really like. I was talking about the director for Foxcatcher. I really like in Whiplash that they do leave some ambiguity, and they don't necessarily try to tell you, who's good, who's bad, who's right, who's wrong. Because it would have been an impossible thing to try to do anyways, because I don't think there's a right answer to that. But I do like the tact that they use, in as far as not trying to force anything on you, as far as this is how you should think or this is how you shouldn't think. But there's all kinds of things to like about Whiplash, and that's a film you can talk about for a long, long time. So definitely highly recommend Whiplash. Like I said, I think that moves into my number one spot for last year. So those were the two films that I saw.
What did it replace?
Nothing.
So you didn't have a number one spot. You just had like a empty void there.
I had some films that I liked. I liked Fury, and a couple other ones, but nothing that I would have really said proudly that it was like my number one.
Gotcha.
I'm still looking to see Selma and A Most Violent Year, so I don't know where those will fall. But right now, Whiplash stands at number one. So, Matt, what about you? I know you did some research, so you might not want to talk about some of those films. How many films did you see this week?
I watched 5 movies this week, I believe.
And were they all for the science fiction genre?
All of them for this. I'll talk about the 2 that didn't make my list.
Okay.
Because I don't see movies nearly to the extent that you or Dan does, or I imagine Hyro for that matter. But so I knew I had to catch up, and my boss offered me Tuesday off, so I went home Tuesday and watched 4 movies just back to back, just to catch up. The ones that I watched that did not make my list, honorable mentions though, because they weren't terrible. The first was John Carter, which I know got panned and didn't make any money, and everyone apparently hated it, but I don't know why. It's a pretty standard story. I mean, it's not, nothing new, I guess, really. But it had some interesting ideas, and if they had made it a trilogy like they wanted, I probably would have saw 2 and 3 in theaters. It was that good, to me, at least.
And
then the other one was... Huh?
So I kind of like that movie, too. It's very like old-timey science fiction, which I kind of liked about it.
Well, is the property really old?
It's like one of the first science fiction books ever. So.
It was, the movie was shown in theaters at the 100th anniversary of the story. It was written by the guy who wrote Tarzan, Edgar Rice Burroughs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Old school.
1912.
I actually haven't seen that one. My sister told me not to. It was one of the only movies she's actually walked out of the theater on.
I want to know what I missed that made this movie so unlikable.
I think it was just, maybe it was so hyped up because it was one of those, it was supposed to be like the first big movie of whatever year that came out, and it just ended up not being that. So.
I was going to say, they dropped a lot of money on it, and maybe that put some stuff into it. I don't know.
Or it could be Taylor Kitsch's kiss of death that he's got going for him, dude. Wasn't he in Battleship as well?
Yeah, that same year he had John Carter in Battleship. And and then that movie with Oliver Stone that he did, I forget the name of it. At least
Battleship gave you...
Is that the one with the two guys are doing it with one girl or whatever?
Yeah, with Aaron Johnson. He was like with the dreadlocks, because,
Yeah. And Blake Lively.
Yeah. And that was the best movie of that year, so there you go.
What was the other one, man?
The other one I watched was I, Frankenstein.
Oof.
I'm not quite sure what they, I don't know. It wasn't a terrible movie. I just don't know why they didn't call it Demons vs. Gargoyles.
Isn't Two-Face in that?
Aaron Eckhart.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
That was one of the classic movies from last year that you had Frankenstein, which had nothing to do with Frankenstein. You had Godzilla that had nothing to do with Godzilla. There was 2 or 3 films that I'm just like the first Hercules movie had nothing to do with Hercules. But I will say that I, Frankenstein, I think I found that better than I should have because I saw that right after the Kellen Lutz Hercules.
Oh, that was so bad.
Oh, why would you do that to yourself?
Hey, it was back, it was a year ago. It was back in February or whatever last year when there was nothing else to see, and I'm like, I'll see these just so I can say I saw them, gave them a shot.
The words Kellen Lutz are still attached to it.
I've learned my lesson. I won't do it again. When he comes out with some Clash of the Titans or something, when they redo that again or something else, stay away from it.
He's taking your order at the local, McDonald's.
Right. And then he was somehow in Expendables. I didn't understand that.
No one did. And no one saw that movie. So.
I did.
I did too, but Not
So Matt, what were your thoughts on I, Frankenstein?
I don't know, man. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't amazing, and it had very little to do with Frankenstein. I also don't know what the whole deal is with him using, like, sticks as a weapon. Or, like, because they kind of made it into a thing, but didn't at the same time. They're like, hey, you could have any one weapon. And then he's like, I'm going to take these sticks. He's like, those sticks are a bad weapon. And he's like, well, I'm Frankenstein. And then he walks away. And then there's like a brief montage of him hitting rocks with the sticks. And then he uses the sticks for one fight and then drops them, and then they don't address them ever again.
That's good writing right there, folks.
Wow.
There you go. And the sad thing is, you're like exactly right when it comes to how they said it and presented it too. So it's not.
All right, Hiro, what did you see this last week?
So far this week, I've watched 2 films. So the first one is Life Itself, the documentary about Roger Ebert.
Nice.
Okay.
Catching up with this one. A lot of people loved this last year. It shows a lot of his warts, and it does a really great job of kind of letting you into various aspects of Roger Ebert's life that we didn't get to see. I think that this got a lot of love from critics and podcasters and just people who love movies for the sake of the fact that we love to love movies, basically, in the same manner that I believe that Roger Ebert did. So while it's very good, I wouldn't go so far as to call it great. I don't think it's like the best documentary I've ever seen, but it is very good. It's tough to watch because they show you like the real, like, I'm not gonna say gruesome, but like they're cleaning out his like lower jaw and stuff, and it's real tough to watch, man. If you don't have if you've got a weak stomach, it's not a good time.
Yeah, they didn't really hold much back regarding, like, really showed what Roger Ebert was or what he became, which is kind of tragic when you think about it. But
right,
like, seeing him like lose his voice, I think that the best part of that documentary to me was like seeing the behind the scenes with from at the movies and him and Siskel and like their back and forth, and
yeah,
I really enjoyed like that. To me, was like the heart of that movie and the best part of it.
I did. I like that stuff. I did. I'm a sucker for the family thing too. So seeing him with his kind of his step family and stuff like that, and that was really nice. But it was a really nice touch. I enjoyed it. And the other movie I watched is Cocaine Cowboys. Are you guys familiar with this documentary?
Yeah,
I've heard of it, but I haven't seen anything on it.
It's a really good documentary that covers the drug trade in Miami in late 70s, early 80s. Basically, it's kind of like, if you've seen Scarface, it's kind of the behind-the-scenes documentary of all the real-life stories that went behind on this. And it's really well shot. It's kind of layered over the Miami Vice kind of theme music and that kind of things. It's done by Billy Corbin, a documentarian that I really enjoy. He did like the U30 for 30 stuff on ESPN. He's done a couple of documentaries I really enjoy. So I'm rewatching this one, and I'm a big fan of this. Obviously, I'm from Miami, so this kind of hits close to home for me. You see all the old streets and all the old things that I grew up with kind of flashing across the screen. So I'm a huge fan of this documentary.
Nice. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, it's really good. You should check it out.
All right. So I think that's it for as far as what things we've seen. Now, we're going to change it up a little bit from normal. We're not going to spend quite as much time talking about the box office and the news and that much, so we have more time for our list, but we will kind of hit on a few things. So just looking at the box office from this past weekend, a week ago, heading into this weekend here. Last weekend, Focus took number 1 at $18 million. Kingsman stayed at the number 2 spot with 11. SpongeBob stayed at number 3 with 10. 50 Shades of Grey went from the first spot down to the 4th spot, down to 10 million, and The Lazarus Effect, the new one, took the 5th spot.
I'm just glad that movie's out so I can stop seeing trailers for it, because Jesus Christ.
The Lazarus Effect?
Yeah. Every time I watch something on demand, that trailer came up, but I don't know.
So interesting that Focus was able, Dan and we were talking about it last week, if Focus would be able to unseed 50 Shades of Grey, or maybe Kingsman might, because we expected a drop, hopefully, for 50 Shades of Grey, and Focus did take that spot. I would like to mention, though, Kingsman has now made its budget, so those involved in the Fantasy Film League, if you had somebody on the Kingsman, the Secret Service, you no longer have to worry about losing points. They have surpassed their budget. And 50 Shades of Grey is in the top spot for the year now with 147 mil. Of note, though, American Sniper brought in 7 million more, and that is now 1 million away from the number 2 spot for 2014.
It's gonna end
so
up
it's 1 million away from Guardians of the Galaxy.
That's sad, because it's totally going to get that.
And it's 4 million away from Hunger Games.
Probably got it as we were talking.
Yeah, so I mean, it has a good shot of ending up the highest grossing film of last year, beating both Guardians of the Galaxy and the Hunger Games.
Absolutely amazing.
Yeah, so I mean that's crazy. I mean, it brought 7 million in this week, so even if it drops down to like 4 or 5 million next week, it's going to do that. So
funny, I was at Barnes and Noble today, and they had just piles of the book, like on end caps behind the cash registers everywhere.
Wow.
Well, I'm trying to key in on that. So looking at next week though. Starting tomorrow, when this episode airs, we'll have Chappie out there, which actually has probably been released in a lot of theaters as we speak. We also have Unfinished Business and a couple other things. Dan, ask you first: Is Chappie number 1 at the box office this next weekend?
Well, considering that I have Hugh Jackman on my film league team, I hope it makes like $200 million this weekend, if possible. My assumption it's probably going to be number 1, but just kind of by default, really. I don't know. I don't think it's going to do tremendously well. The buzz hasn't been all that great, unfortunately, and it's kind of, the District 9 didn't do great. It did decent at the box office, but it wasn't like a strong opening, and Elysium was only kind of average too, so I doubt it's gonna bring in a huge amount. I don't think it's really gonna challenge 50 Shades at all for the year.
Right. I can definitely see Chappie opening up at number 1 this next weekend, and Kingsman still staying at that 2 spot, and Focus dropping down to like 3 or 4. I could definitely see that happening. So we'll have to see. I mean, I know Chappie's not getting a lot of buzz, but I still think there's enough. The trailer's been seen enough where people are going to go see it, and it should come in number 1 this next weekend.
That Vince Vaughn movie might come in number 2.
Yeah, that's true. Unfinished Business. Comedies sometimes have that. You can never predict it really with comedies, which ones are going to resonate and which ones aren't, but when they do, they make some money for sure.
It's helpful if it has Kevin Hart or Melissa McCarthy in it, so that they don't know why.
That's for sure. And just quick, we got about 5 or 6 things to touch on with news. Some we might spend a little bit more time on than others. Just a quick note, since we had been talking about it in our most anticipated films of 2015, at least I brought it up, and we kept calling it the Steven Spielberg, Tom Hanks film. Well, we can stop calling it that. It actually has a title now, so the Cold War thriller is now called Bridge of Spies. So that is the title to the...
God, that sounds cheesy.
Yeah, Bridge of Spies. And they actually released a little bit more about it as well, as far as what the actual premise is going to be. And it's scripted by Joel and Ethan Coen, and it's going to tell the true story of James Donovan, a lawyer who was hired by the CIA to secretly negotiate the release of an American pilot shot down in Soviet airspace in 1960.
It sounds like the title sounds like a James Bond movie.
It does. And so we have Steven Spielberg. As far as director stars, we have Tom Hanks, Amy Ryan, and then John Williams will be doing the score. Not that that's a surprise.
He's done every movie except for one for Spielberg.
Yeah, it says it's going to be his 27th score for Steven Spielberg. That's ridiculous. But so yeah, that one has a title. Nothing to really talk about there, but I just wanted to at least bring the title up. Some people are excited, some people aren't, but we got the Beauty and the Beast live action film that's happening now has some casting things, and since we talk about casting a little bit with our Fantasy Film League, I don't think anybody has either of these people, but Luke Evans and Dan Stevens. Dan Stevens you'll probably remember if you saw The Guest from last year.
Oh, I did.
Yeah, so Dan Stevens was the I guess the quote unquote bad guy in that film.
He's the loveliest of bad guys in that movie. Wow.
And Luke Evans, obviously most people know who that is. I do think that they got this backwards, though, because Luke Evans has been cast to play Gaston, and Dan Stevens has been cast to play the Beast.
Wow.
And I would have thought they would have done vice versa, but maybe that's... Because I think Dan Stevens would have been a better Gaston, and Luke Evans is kind of looks like he could pull off a Beast mode more
you're
easily.
basically saying that Luke Evans is nowhere near as pretty as Dan Stevens.
I mean, I don't want to say that, but I thought you might say that, so I was just trying to lead you up to it.
I wear like a badge of honor, my friend.
So, just given that, and now the name is escaping me as far as who's playing the beauty there.
Emma Watson.
Yes. So based on those three people, more interest in Beauty and the Beast, less interest in Beauty and the Beast, or nothing's changed there for you, Dan?
Nothing's changed, honestly. Yeah, nothing's really changed.
What about you, Hyro? You more interested now that the Beauty Kid's in it?
Sure, why not? I mean, just going off the trailers for Cinderella, that kind of looks interesting to me a little bit. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I have kids or something. I don't know. But we'll see. Why not?
Matt, any interest in Beauty and the Beast?
Little interest, but I don't think this affects it. I want to see some live action pictures of Gaston, but you know.
Yeah. I see what they do with those two and how they're going to make that work. Like I said, I think they switched them around. But the other casting things real quick, Independence Day 2, getting some names attached to it. Jeff Goldblum, Jesse Usher playing the main character, and Liam Hemsworth. Those three names make you more or less interested in Independence Day 2, Dan?
Honestly, despite the fact that a lot of his movies have not been great lately, the fact that Will Smith is not in it does make me a little less interested, but glad to see Goldblum. So I guess it's kind of a push for me.
Okay. What about you, Hyro?
Oh, for me, I'm all in. As long as Goldblum is in, I'm in. Will Smith, it doesn't matter. Especially with his track record lately, his presence isn't really needed. But Jeff Goldblum, to me, is awesome, and I want to see much more of that guy.
Yeah, I'm all aboard with Jeff Goldblum. Like to see him. I was disappointed when I saw him in Mordecai earlier this year because he really didn't do anything, and I was kind of like sat up on my seat as soon as I saw him on screen. I'm like, oh, Jeff Goldblum's in this, and then nothing happened with him, so that was disappointing. But yeah, I'm kind of a push with you, Dan. I'm not necessarily needing Will Smith to be in this, so that doesn't bother me. Jeff Goldblum being in is cool. I don't know what exactly Liam Hemsworth is supposed to be doing in this film. I didn't read up on it, so I'll wait to see. Sometimes I don't want to know too much about it. Matt, any interest in Independence Day 2?
I'll take half from one and half from the other. I want Will Smith, but I'm glad there's Jeff Goldblum.
All right. A couple other things that I found interesting I wanted to bring up. A couple news articles coming out lately about the Academy and the idea that next year they're considering going back to the 5 nominee picture for the Best Picture. They've had the ability to go up to 10 the last, since 2009 or 10?
2009. They moved to 2009 after Dark Knight didn't get nominated in 2009.
Right. So then they expanded it, even though the last couple of years they've only done, 8, 9, and 9. They haven't used all 10 for a little while. And now they're saying that they might be considering going back down to 5. Dan, is that a good idea or a bad idea?
I think that's a bad idea, because I feel like the additional ones that ended up getting nominated are the ones that I like the most. Like this year, if they went to 5, I doubt Whiplash would have been nominated. I doubt, it probably would have been like Imitation Game and Theory of Everything, kind of like the general one. So I like the fact that they've expanded it, because it has gotten attention to like smaller films like Whiplash or like Winter's Bone or Beasts of the Southern Wild, like these other movies that maybe general public would have not known anything about, but are now getting attention. And I know the idea was to try to bring in the big blockbusters, which really hasn't happened. But I kind of like it. I think it's the one good thing the Academy has been able to do, even if it's just by default. So.
Yeah, it seemed like the idea originally was that a lot of people complained about the Best Pictures because, if you weren't like a cinephile or you weren't like doing a movie podcast, usually the Best Pictures all of a sudden were a bunch of films you'd never heard of. Or just came out in this, that, and the other, so they were like, oh, let's expand it, let's get stuff, make it potential so you could have things like Dark Knight Rises, or not Dark Knight Rises, but Dark Knight, different big blockbusters, like you said, can come in there. And then you have a year like this year where American Sniper made more than all the other films combined. I mean, I know it made a ton of money, but you had a bunch, obviously independent, smaller films that made them kind of re-question it. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. What about you, Hyro? Should they leave it at 10 or should they go down to 5?
I would say leave it at 10 or keep going, man. Who cares? I mean, they keep picking the wrong winners anyways. Yeah, do it like March Madness, like the tournament, the NCAA tournament. Just let everybody in and have them battle it out because they keep picking the wrong movies anyways, man. I mean, Before Midnight should have won a couple years ago. Freaking Boyhood should have won this year. It's just a mess. So yeah, just keep adding more. Why not?
I think 10's fine. I don't understand why. I understand that there's a process and you have to get X percentage of the ballots in order to get it. That's why we only get 8 sometimes, and that's why we only get 9 sometimes. But I have no problem with it being up to 10, so I don't necessarily think going down to 5 is going to make it that much more, prestigious or anything like that. Everybody has their set opinion about the Academy. It's not going to change if they have 5 or 10 nominees. I don't think they need to worry about diluting the pool, so to speak, if that's one of their arguments. Matt, I know you're not a huge award show type person, but any opinions on that one?
I was against it when they increased it from 5. Now I don't want them to go back. Like, I don't see what it's gonna do. Like, I imagine, honestly, if this is a cynical way to look at it, having more movies in the Best Picture category is gonna get people to see more movies. It's gonna be better for the economy, better for movie goers in general. It's only gonna benefit. They're only gonna pick one winner. As long as they don't go, hey, we're doing 15 and there's gonna be 2 winners, I don't see why it's bad.
Yeah. Right. I think it's a good awareness piece too for people that don't watch, aren't as in tune with the movie scene throughout the year, and then they see the Best Picture nominees, and all of a sudden it brings some attention to those films. They're usually brought back to theaters, so like you said, I think it's good because it exposes more people to more films. Another interesting thing here, I don't know if you guys are following the whole idea that Netflix and what they've been doing with Beasts of No Nation, the Idris Elba film. But basically what Netflix has done is they have a strategy here that they are going to be releasing the film via Netflix the same day that it's released to theater. And that has caused I think the top 4 or the top 5 movie chains in the country to not bring Beasts of No Nation to their theaters when this is going to happen. They've said they won't do it because they're pissed off basically that Netflix is going to have it streaming the same day, and they don't like that. So now it's going to be just like smaller theater chains and more, independent places that are going to be able to show this if this follows through, which causes all kinds of different complications as far as does it make it eligible to be in the award season? Is it award eligible? Because it has to be in so many theaters, and it has to be in, I think, New York and LA for X number of weeks to make it eligible. What do you think, Dan, of the idea of Netflix kind of getting the rights to this film and deciding that they're going to do a streaming at the same time that it's actually released in theater, and kind of bucking or kind of throwing this in the face of the major theater chains?
Well, I mean, I'm surprised they're trying to do it at the same time, because you think about it just logically. If you have Netflix, are you going to spend $8 to watch a movie you can watch for free? So I kind of get why the movie theaters are like, no, we're not going to play this movie because no one's going to come see it, because who's going to pay for a movie? I mean, it's not like a movie that you necessarily have to see in the big screen. It's not like a big blockbuster. So I actually don't blame the movie theaters for doing what they're doing.
And do you think this is going to be a trend of something that's going to start happening? Or are we going to see the landscape of movies changing, where there's quite a few movies that come straight to streaming or straight to this that you don't have to necessarily go to the theater to watch?
I think it's inevitability, man.
Yeah, I think it's only going to increase. I mean, even with movies on demand, especially with independent films and movies like this, I think it's going to be more the norm. And you probably will get to a point where the only movies you see in theaters are those big blockbusters. We're kind of already there as is. I mean, American Sniper did kind of buck that trend a little bit, but I think that's more of an anomaly than anything. So I think like was mentioned, that it's only going to continue, and you're going to just get more stuff that's streaming before it's in theaters.
And, I don't think it's necessarily a terrible thing for some of these things. Obviously, as someone who goes to the theater so much, if I can save a few dollars and watch something from the comfort of my free computer at home, I'm not going to be opposed to that. But I do. My only thought is I hope it doesn't necessarily take away anything from these films.
Yeah, my big worry is for the independent movie theaters. The ones that show the smaller movies. That the fact that a lot of what they show tend to be available on demand now. So does that hurt them? Ones that aren't the big chains that are showing the more indie films, the more art house films, that they're probably going to be the ones that are hurt most by it. So that is kind of a bummer.
What do you think, Matt?
I don't. I got weird feelings on something like this. I have a unique perspective because last year they released the first episode of the new season of Doctor Who in theaters at the same time it was on. Or no, actually, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks after it hit television. So it was an even more free way to see it than Netflix or whatever. And I was really excited about that concept of being able to see something that I wouldn't normally be able to see on the big screen there. But at the same time, it didn't like resonate or do extremely well for me. So I don't know.
I guess where I'm torn the most, and the last thing I'll say on it, because obviously, even if you go right now to your on-demand segment, your section on your TV, you're going to see like a whole bunch of 2015 films that you can watch. Maps to the Stars. I could name about 5 or 6 that I was just looking at yesterday. So I mean, it's not like it's a brand new thing as far as that goes. But for me, even though I don't want to spend a gazillion dollars at the theater, I enjoy going to the theater. So part of me wants to be able to go to a theater and see something like Beasts of No Nation. I like Idris Elba. I like the plot of that thing. It was on my most anticipated list. So that's something that I want to be able to go to the theater and see. So I'm kind of torn because I want to be able to go see it at the theater, but I'm not going to complain about not having to spend money on it too. So I don't know. I'm kind of mixed on that one. But another thing about going to a theater, which I'm interested to see if any of you guys are even considering this. We had a couple different articles this week about AMC, and I don't know which the chains are there. I know, Dan, you're near an AMC chain. I know Matt and I are. I don't know what the theater chains down by you, Hyro, are.
I just came from an AMC.
Okay. But AMC has announced a couple different things that they're doing to celebrate Avengers Age of Ultron. Number one, they obviously have the double feature where they're going to be showing the first Avengers, and then they're going to go right into a showing of the second one. And then they also have this Ultimate Marathon that they've been talking about now. And I've seen 2 different stories. I'm not sure 100% which one's right, because the one is saying that it's 11 films, and it starts at 6 p.m. the day before Avengers is released. And it's literally 25 hours straight of being in the theater.
Jesus.
And you see all 11 films, and then right when you've been at the theater for 24 hours, that's when you get to start seeing the new Avengers.
That theater's going to smell awesome.
Right. And then the other one, but I tried to go on AMC's website to check it out to see if that was exactly what was happening. And then the one they're advertising there is a 6-movie marathon. So it's a 6-film thing. I think it starts early in the morning, so it's not a 25-hour in the theater thing. It's just I can't remember which exactly 6 films they're showing. But it's a 6-film lead up, and then you get to see the new Avengers. I think it's a $40 ticket. So you spend $40 and you get to see 6 films. And I think you get like $5 a credit for food or something like that. So
they're going to buy you a sip of water?
So yeah. But I don't know, is that when you decide to go, when theaters do this, because I'm sure they're going to do something similar with Star Wars, they're going to do something where you can see the first 6 films of that too. Is this something that interests you, Dan, or is this something you would stay away from, or is it fun just trying to do something? Because I know you do the Best Picture kind of marathon type things.
Yeah, I've done the Best Picture showcase, which has kind of become a tradition for me, and those are interesting because those are, it's like 8, depending on how many movies, it can be like 8 or 9 spread over 2 different days. The 24-hour one doesn't really interest me because I feel like I'd be tired. I'd fall asleep. I've had times like 9:30, so that wouldn't work. I don't know. I don't think I'd be super interested. I've done other ones too. I went to like a marathon of like all the extended editions of Lord of the Rings, which was way too much Middle Earth. It's like 12 hours of Middle Earth. It was intense. But I don't know. It's interesting. I probably wouldn't go see it just because I've watched the Marvel movies so much already, and I don't really necessarily need to see them again before I watch the Avengers. And they've they were out last year. So, but
right.
It's cool. I like it when they do things, but I won't go to it.
I like the idea of it. I don't think my legs would like the idea of it. I don't think I'd be able to walk at the end of it. But they do say if you make it through the whole marathon that they do have a medal that they give you. So, an Avengers medal. So is that enough to make you want to do this, Hyro?
Hell no. Hell no. There's no way in hell that I'm going to do this, man. I mean, aside from the fact that I have kids and I have responsibilities and that kind of thing, I mean, I just can't see myself in the theater for that long. I love the movies. Nobody loves the movies more than I do, but dude, I just don't see myself. I mean, I'll get bed sores and start to smell. It's just, ugh.
You're like the old grandpa and Willy Wonka.
And I'm going to have to sit through Iron Man 3 and 2 and Thor 2 and, oh, no, thank you, sir. No.
What about you, Matt?
I'm interested in the medal. I'll see if I can get one off of eBay or something later.
So you did it?
Honestly, I don't want to spend $40. I don't want to spend 25 hours. But if any one of my friends was like, "Dude, we're doing this," I'd do it just to try it. Although,
if there was a group going, I might be able to do it, but I seriously don't think I'd be able to walk after that. Maybe the 6 films, but I don't know if I could do 25. My problem with the 25 hours one is I don't want to get to the film that I'm most excited to see at the 25-hour mark.
Yeah,
and then it's a 3-hour movie on top of that.
Right.
I'd
finally get to the one I want to see, and that's the one I'd fall asleep through.
I don't have issues falling asleep during movies, so like somewhere, around midnight or whatever, I'll get my 8 hours.
And hopefully there would be a break at one point so you to get some real food. I've done movie marathons before just on my own. I usually do it I used to do it to try to catch up, and I'd do it once a year where I'd go see 5 films. But you have to have you have to strategize that and have a spot where you can go get real food in between at some point. I used to have I had one group of friends that would come and meet me in the parking lot with the real food the one time, just because I was afraid if I was on movie theater food the whole day, I was not going to function well for about a week.
Dysentery.
Yeah.
And you
all right, so that
because it's like $8 for ice. So.
Right. It's like, can I bring my own bucket and just fill this with whatever? And then just hitting today, some news on Harrison Ford that, Matt, you brought up. Apparently Harrison Ford has crashed the plane he was piloting into a golf course. Is that what it was?
Yep.
And
I've got the article open if you want me to.
Yeah, what's the deal with this, and how bad is he hurt?
So somewhere around 2 p.m., he reported that he was having engine issues. He was in a 2-person plane, but flying solo with no co-pilot or anything. He downed the plane,
the Millennium Falcon.
Trust me, there's a lot of fun images if you can have a morbid curiosity / hilariousness. I don't know, whatever. He crashed it into a golf course. He was originally reported as serious. He's then downgraded to fair to moderate. He has some non-life-threatening injuries, but they are still somewhat serious, including lacerations to the head and possible fractures. His son got up on Twitter, said, "Dad is okay, battered but okay. He is every bit the man you would think he is. He's incredibly strong." It just sounds like, hey, he hurt himself again. He's 72, so he can't really take too many more hurting of himself. The plane is really jacked up if you do a search for that.
It's like a World War II replica plane, too. It's
it looked like it was a cool plane.
He is trying his best not to survive this Star Wars film.
Oh, man.
So he needs to stay away from all kinds of aircraft or vehicles of any kind.
He's an old-ass man. He needs to just go sit down and relax for a little while, man.
Yeah. Let someone else do the piloting and all that stuff. Why is he allowed to? At 72? Why is he allowed to be up there flying a plane by himself?
People over 65 shouldn't even be allowed to drive a car without extra testing, much less flying planes. Get out of here!
God, he only crashed into a golf course. Jesus. Anyways,
he thought he was in a golf cart and he forgot. It was kind of weird.
Insure spilling everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Last thing before we get into our list here, a couple trailers that came out. Ex Machina. I'm probably saying is that how you say that?
Machina.
Machina. Thank you. I always say it wrong. Mr. Holmes, starring Ian McKellen. Selfless. The Salvation, which is on demand, so that's a trailer, but it's available on demand. And the big game, and of course the third trailer for Avengers. I'm staying away from all the trailers for Avengers. But Matt or Dan or Hyro, have you seen any of those and any reaction to any of those trailers?
The only one I saw was the Avengers trailer. I'm actively trying to avoid trailers this year, almost going complete. But it's impossible to avoid the Avengers because it's just on every website I click on. It's just it pops up and it starts screaming at me. I saw it today in the theater and it looks cool. Looks a lot like the old Avengers, so it should be pretty fun.
I found it interesting that Ex Machina and Selfless, both obviously science fiction films, and that's the subject that we're talking about today, so that was kind of ironic, I guess. That's probably the wrong use of that word, like everybody else does. But thanks. I just trying to stay in suit there. But Matt, did you watch any of them? Any of them catch your interest?
One, I did not watch any of them, and I'm surprised at how well I've done at not seeing an Avengers trailer. I remember when I didn't see the first one, it just didn't happen, and all my friends were freaking out, how have you not seen it? How have you not seen it? And now I've seen a couple of movies in theaters, and I still haven't seen an Avengers trailer. Nice. Even the last movie I went to had an Ant-Man trailer, but not Avengers, which was surprising to me.
Yeah, I've just seen the first little trailer or teaser for Avengers. I haven't seen anything since then. I've stayed away from it. Dan, did you see any of those trailers?
Just the Avengers 3 trailer in it, like Harold said, it looks like an Avengers movie, and I think I'm going to see it now, so there you go.
All right. Well, links to all those trailers will be on the episode post, so you can go check them out and let us know what you think about those films. We're going to take a quick break, and then we will be back with our countdown of the top 10 sci-fi fantasy films from the last 5 years.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
Hi, this is Greg.
This is Chuck.
And this is Dan, and we are Talking in Circles.
Because the world needs another podcast, we are here as Geekcast Radio's newest edition.
And as the title says, each week we get lost in conversation about a wide range of topics, including movies, comics, games, art, TV, and even occasionally sports.
We play games and discuss pivotal topics like who would win in a fight, the Kool-Aid Man or Tony the Tiger, and examine the hot-button issues of the world of geekdom.
We keep things fresh by taking timeless topics in new directions.
We are simply three friends having a fun time talking about life's most fascinating foibles.
Stay connected with us every Tuesday on iTunes or at geekcastradio.com.
On the Simplistic Reviews podcast, we talk movies. We talk TV. We talk.
Hello, Julie, what the heck are you doing?
Trying to make our spots sound more exciting by adding explosions.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you could have got the point across with sound effects, not the real thing.
Download this show on iTunes or at simplisticreviews.blogspot.com.
I'm sure your insurance company will cover that.
No, they won't.
No, they probably won't.
Now back to the show. Do you see how your patience paid off?
All right, thanks for sticking with us. As I said, this is our first of our series of countdowns here that we're looking back at the decade so far since we're halfway through 2010 to 2014. Marks the halfway point, and we're starting off with science fiction and fantasy films, kind of a catch-all category. Before we get into our actual list, just kind of to clear the air as far as how we approach this list, kind of any criteria that we used in creating our list, and maybe a definition of what you guys kind of view as sci-fi fantasy, because what I was thinking about when I was going through this is some of our genres that we'll get to in later weeks and months are very clear-cut. Like, when we get to animated films, it's an animated film or it's not, I guess, unless Lego Movie doesn't count as an animated film to the Academy. But, that's clear-cut. Comic book films, that's pretty clear-cut. Everybody has a different definition of science fiction. And I know, technically it's science fiction or it's not, but it seems like everybody kind of defines that a bit different. So, kind of, what's your viewpoint on science fiction, Dan, and what qualifies and what doesn't, and what criteria did you use, or if any, did you use when you were creating your list? Did you eliminate things, or did you do anything special when you were going to make your list up?
Usually, when I made my list, the thing I kind of considered was like how big of an element was the science fiction themes or fantasy themes in the movie, because there are a lot of movies that like maybe science fiction is in the background, like it's a general film, but there are like elements of sci-fi that maybe aren't the major focus. So like there are maybe movies quality-wise I would put on it, but basically because they're not very much science fiction, I didn't put it in. I don't know, like, to me science fiction can pretty much be anything. I think that's what's good about it. It doesn't have to be a Star Wars. It could be more low-key or more dramatic. It's just that it has a certain element to it that is is in a different type of world than we live in for whatever reason, or has some sort of maybe technology component or scientific component that changes. Or fantasy is a little bit even more open-ended, but to me fantasy is like when you have things happening that can't be explained through science, I guess. So you put them all together, and it's I have one on my list that I wondered if I think it might get some kickback because it may be not technically in either category, but considering the list we're making, I felt this would be the only place for it, and you'll know it when I bring it up. So it was kind of hard determining what should belong and what shouldn't.
Yeah, because there's definitely some films out there, like you said, that technically probably do qualify as science fiction, but if you just think about it, your first thought isn't science fiction. Your first thought is, oh, that's just a drama, or that's just a whatever. There's been like a surge of like romantic comedies in the last 5 to 10 years that technically fit into the science fiction realm that some people might not consider. As far as criteria for myself goes, the only really criteria I used, And I'm not going to say if this actually affected my list or not, because I decided it before I actually went to make the 10 films that were going to fit in my list, so it may or may not have impacted that, but I decided that I wasn't going to allow 2 films from any franchise in. So, not saying that it would count, but things that you could think of would be like, there's been more than one film for Hunger Games. There's been more than one film for Harry Potter in the last 5 years. There's been more than one film in the Planet of the Apes franchise. So any of those types of things. If I was going to include one in, which I won't say if I did or not, but if I was going to include one, I did not include 2.
So which Twilight one did you choose?
Ouch. I thought you knew me, Dan. So that was my only criteria, is I was not going to allow 2 spots to be taken out from the same franchise. Matt, any criteria that you used?
Well, what I did was I listed every movie that in my mind was eligible for this list. Uh-huh. And when we first decided to do the list, I had 17 movies. So I couldn't really have too many extra criteria beyond that. Otherwise, I wasn't going to have a list.
That is fair. A fair way to do it. What about you, Hyro? Anything that you used? Anything you disqualified or anything like that?
I was the exact opposite of Dan, where he's looking for the sci-fi or the fantasy to be the big aspect of the movie. I was extremely liberal with my list. So I'm sure it'll raise some eyebrows, a couple of them. Most of them are pretty standard, but I was very liberal. Like, I just wanted any kind of sci-fi or any kind of fantasy element to at least be kind of in the forefront. Not completely enveloping the film, but at least active, part of the plot of the story.
This isn't going to be like when your friend picked a female for the manliest man, is it?
Oh boy, that was a doozy. Yeah,
I just listened to that episode recently. I was trying to catch up on see who was going to butt heads on this episode. So
yeah, that was bad.
All right, well, with all that out of the way then, we will get right into our countdown, and we are going to start with the guests. So, Hyro, what is your number 10 film from the last 5 years as far as science fiction and fantasy goes?
Okay, so here's one of those kind of liberal ones, and it's from 2013, and it is Her. And so the sci-fi element is, obviously, he is in love with a operating system. So there kind of comes the sci-fi kind of futuristic aspect, the world that they have. I love this movie. I thought it kind of came out right at that crossroads, kind of like American Sniper did this year, where it's kind of on the hinge of 2014, 2013, but this was the previous year, so it didn't make my final list because I hadn't seen it in time for last year. But I love this movie. I thought Johansson was great. Joaquin Phoenix was fantastic. Just a fantastic film.
I will hold off on saying anything. So.
Dan and I had a real good episode where we covered Her last year that was probably one of the favorite episodes that we did together, as far as I'm concerned. So that was back when we agreed on everything, and so I will agree with Dan, and I will hold my thoughts on Her for a little bit. Go ahead.
Actually, just one. I don't think you need to worry about whether that's a liberal choice or not, because in my mind, like, the science fiction elements of that movie, as someone who has not seen it at all, but based on just the trailers, the science fiction in that movie are more key to the story than even Star Wars. Like, you could take out all of the science fiction out of Star Wars, and it would just be the same story and just as good. And Star Wars is more fantasy to me. It's a bunch of dudes with swords.
That's a good point.
All right, well then, Matt, what is your number 10 pick?
My number 10 pick, so similar to you with not wanting to put multiples of the same franchise, I didn't want to put any, like, sequels on there. So I tried to avoid it, but honestly, I've been talking this movie up for pretty much since I got on this show. So for no reason other than that, I gave number 10 to Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides, just because I think that movie is ridiculous. It's everything.
It's bad.
Oh, no, it's not. It's like literally the movie from minute one is like, we are aware that we are Pirates of the Caribbean, and we're just going to throw everything we've ever done in your face over and over again. And it was, I don't know, it was hilarious and fun. Not maybe the best cinema you can get, but, like, hilarious. Maybe for reasons they didn't intend. I
don't hate the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise as much as a lot of people do. I don't know. I'd have to revisit them all to say which one's good and which one's bad, or which ones are in the middle, this, that, and the other. But I do think they're at least the ones that I remember were fun films. But I honestly can't separate which film is which. So
yeah, I don't even know which one that is. Is that the last one, or is that like the third one?
It's the one that doesn't have the bloomin' onion in it.
Oh, okay.
don't they like all run together like a Mumford and Sons song? It's just like one long movie.
Kind of.
I think that's another marathon you can go through. Watching all them back to back. All right, Dan, what's your number 10?
Well, I talked about like one that I wasn't sure if it would necessarily fit, but since we're also not doing like a top 10 horror, and I'm not a huge horror fan, I figured this would be the only place I'd be able to talk about this movie. And it does have science fiction elements. It does have a little bit of fantasy as well. Just kind of a little bit of like an amalgamation of like a lot of different genres. And it's just, to me, it's like one of the most original movies that come out in the last few years. And that's The Cabin in the Woods.
Nice.
And I pretty much love that movie just because I'm a huge Bradley Whitford fan from being a fan of West Wing, and him and Richard Jenkins, like their interplay with one another, to me is like the best part of that entire film. I just love that, like, you know, that office element that they have. So I just think too, and even like I said, I'm not a huge horror fan, but I think it has a lot of interesting things to say about that genre and just movies in general. So, and I think it's like a really cool concept that they have a lot of fun with. So
I did not even think about that one, but I will say, again, as also someone that does not like the horror genre, that is a quote-unquote horror film that people can watch that are not into the horror genre. Because I had a lot of fun with that, and I thought it was very entertaining, and it was a surprise for me when I watched it. So I think that's a great pick. Hyro, have you seen Cabin in the Woods?
I have seen it. I'm gonna have to go back and watch that because I saw it and I was a little. I thought it was okay. You know, I wasn't floored by it the way a lot of people are. I don't hate the movie, but I don't actively love it either. I'm just.
Do you like horror films?
You know, I'm an '80s kid, so of course I like my camp. I like my Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street and Halloween films. I like horror films, so. Okay. But that one I wouldn't even consider it really a horror film because it's
right. It's kind of like its own genre.
Yeah, it's almost like a joke on the horror film, or kind of like just a play on it. It's creative for sure. But I'm not sure if it really fit for me.
All right. As for me, my number 10 pick, I'm going to go back to 2012, and I'm going to go with the film Looper, with Bruce Willis and Joseph Gordon-Levitt. I wanted to revisit this one so it could be a little more fresh, but I do remember enjoying this one a lot. I think Joseph Gordon-Levitt was pretty ridiculous in this, as far as how well he seemed to fit that character, which I didn't expect at the beginning. And I think that was the best science fiction film probably of 2012. So I don't know what your guys' opinion on Looper is, but that would just be my number 10 film.
I will say I will again withhold comment for now, and I will.
Same for me.
All right. So apparently, at least there's some agreement here before we all start tearing each other apart here later on.
I didn't.
So that's our. Okay. So that is our number 10s. That means it's back to you, Hyro, for your number 9 pick.
I went to 2011 with this one, and I have Super 8 from J.J. Abrams. Nice. This is an awesome, fun love letter to Spielberg, basically, and kind of the 80s fun little sci-fi adventure films of that era. I love this movie. I thought it was charming. I'm not sure if I like the creature itself, the design.
Right.
But that was the only real knock I had on the film. Other than that, I had a great time with this movie. Just such a wonderful film. And you know what? I love the little flash on the screen. Everybody who hates that, I hope he does it non-stop in the new Star Wars movie. Just give it tons of it.
I honestly think that one somewhat went under the radar. Super 8 seemed like it did not get talked about that much that year for me. I don't know if it was. I mean, it has an 82 on Rotten Tomatoes, which is a pretty good score for the critics. 75 from the audience there, and I enjoyed that film too. I'm not quite sure why more people didn't talk about it. I'm not saying it's like the best film ever, but I think it is fun. It's a fun kind of reflection back on, like you said, the Spielberg, E.T. type things. It seemed like they tried to do something similar when they did Earth to Echo this last year, but I think Super 8 was a superior film. Dan, you saw Super 8, didn't you?
Yeah, I like Super 8. I think, the homages to Spielberg are there for sure, and my issue with it is more so, like, I felt like it was a great homage, but it didn't, like, form its own identity in my mind. It just always felt like a guy trying to do Spielberg. And I thought like J.J. Abrams is really great at creating mystery, but he's often really bad at solving it. And I thought, like you mentioned, Hyro, that the monster itself was just really forgettable. Like he built it up to something, and it just ended up not being much of anything. And if anything, I think it would have been a better movie without the science fiction element. If it was just a story about these kids and this kid trying to get over the fact his mom died. I thought that was like the strength of the movie, where like a lot of the creature element really, like, I don't know, it didn't go any place. I wanted more from it, basically.
It's similar to Jaws, where it works best when the creature's off screen.
Definitely.
And also, one thing that you mentioned about, like, he's good about the homage aspect of it. This movie reminds me of a Tarantino film where he's kind of just basically riffing off of all the kind of, like, genre films that he loved growing up or back in the day, like in the 70s and stuff like that. This is kind of J.J. Abrams' take on that, but for his 80s films and in his own way. So I kind of see them kind of, basically it's J.J. Abrams doing his Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah,
I can see where you're getting that.
I can definitely get that vibe. And like I said, I did like it. It wasn't consideration for me, but I do think like it should get talked about more, because I do think it kind of a movie that came and went, and it doesn't really hold the place I expected it to, especially coming from Abrams, who is pretty respected as a director. So.
Right. All right, Matt, what is your number 9?
My number 9, and I don't know, when I started writing this list, I was like, maybe I should have gotten more definite rules. I'm a rules guy, and I hate breaking rules, especially if I didn't know they were there. So, my number 9 is Brave. Like, I get that it's animated, and I don't know if that is allowed or not, but it wasn't specifically not allowed. And I definitely haven't seen 10 animated movies in the last 5 years, so this is the only list I could get it on.
There you go. That's fine.
I loved a lot of the elements of Brave. I loved the characters. I loved the world. The story was a little too basic for me, even for a kids movie. Like you've seen even in the last year more in-depth stories, less or more risks, I guess. But other than that, I thought it was great. And I would love to see more from it, especially a second story that's not just so cut and dry basic. But yeah, I don't know. I really like the world and the characters.
All right, definitely fits as far as that one you can make for that. I didn't include any animated on my list, since I will be on the animated episode as well. But since you're not, you're totally within your rights to do so.
So does that mean I could put superhero movies on my list, since I'm not on the superhero list? What the hell?
Hey man, Iron Man is totally sci-fi.
Yeah,
we're gonna lose control here. Everybody's gonna be changing their list as we.
Yeah, I know, like, because I've got 2 that I eliminated just for that purpose.
I'm gonna put ones from like 2 years, like from like 20 years ago, just to kind of fill it out a little bit.
It doesn't have to be in those
Willow
5 years.
Willow is my number 9.
Willow, I love it. Dan, what's your next one? It's not Willow. What is it?
Willow 2. Back in the Hood. No. My number 9. There are a few films on here I feel like I'm going to get a little bit of crap for, and this is probably my first one. I feel like I'm getting a little backlash, which I understand, and I'm not afraid to say that I do like the Harry Potter movies a great deal, especially third and above. And this one I kind of cheated with. I'm not going to lie. And I kind of combined the last 2 and just said Deathly Hallows, Harry Potter Deathly Hallows for my number 9. If I had to pick one, I'd probably go with the part 1, actually, because I think to me, it's my favorite Harry Potter movie. I just think it's the most unique and definitely gets into those characters a lot more. And a lot of people don't like it because it's rather slow, but I really like that movie. And I don't know why it is. Like, I'm not I never really read the books of Harry Potter, but I really love the movies. I think they look fantastic. The cinematography and that are actually really quite good. It's actually underrated for that element. And their scores, too, are also fantastic. They're really well made. And Ralph Fiennes is amazing as Voldemort. He has so much fun with that performance. So I wanted to get some fantasy representation, and considering the fact that this is probably one of the biggest fantasy franchises of all time, I do feel like it does fit. So I went with Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1 or Part 1 and 2 for my number 9.
I'm not going to give you any crap, Dan, because I considered both of them. I think I had them both in my top 20, top 25, somewhere in there. And I thought real strong about at least giving Harry Potter some representation on my list. I ended up not doing it, but I'm glad that you mentioned them, because especially if you're looking at the fantasy genre, I think it's something you got to consider. And as we get through our list, I think we'll kind of see that science fiction there's a lot more to choose from than fantasy in the last 5 years. So I don't think it's a bad pick, and I think there's a lot of Harry Potter fans out there that'll be glad that we mentioned it. Hiro, are you a fan or not a fan of the Harry Potter films?
They're okay.
That's a good answer.
Yeah,
right
that's my answer. They're okay. I mean, they're very forgettable to me. Like once I watch them, I just couldn't completely mind flush them. You know what I mean? It's like summer school or something like that. I just completely wipe them off of my brain, and it's not on purpose. Like I'm actively trying to hate them. It's this world that I just never really got into. All this gobbledygook of these crazy names and all this stuff. I just never really felt at home in that universe. So but the films aren't bad. They're pretty good. I mean, I have fun watching them, but then just as soon as I'm done, it's over, and
right.
I'm off to watch Super 8 again.
There you go.
See, Kevin, I always thought you hated those movies. I guess maybe I'm mistaken.
No. That's Mike that doesn't like.
I apologize for confusing you. That's a big insult. So.
But no, these are my girlfriend's favorite films. We're actually going to the Wizarding World of Harry Potter here in a couple months at Universal Studios. So I will be rewatching. Yes, I will. We will be, and I will be rewatching all these films in preparation for that. I will let you know what my final verdict on those is after I sit through all of them again. And it's kind of like I have the same problem with Harry Potter that I did do, like I mentioned with Pirates of the Caribbean and some of those films. I have problems separating which film's which.
Yeah, I get that. Which is, I think, why the Part 1, Deathly Hallows Part 1, to me is one of the best, because it's so much different than all the other ones where it really changes everything. So, to me, that's the one that really stands like as a unique addition to the series.
Right. Matt, have you fan or not a fan of Harry Potter?
I've gone on the record saying I like things to follow their source material if you're adapting them. So after the third Harry Potter movie, I stopped watching them. Because they literally chopped the book up into a way that doesn't even make sense anymore. Like, it didn't even work as a movie to me.
And that's why I don't read, so it works for me. I never have that issue.
There you go.
All right, so I have no idea where we're at. We're at me, I guess, for number 9. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to go to 2013. I do hear I hear mixed opinions on this one. I don't know if it's as polarizing as I thought it was, but I'm going with Pacific Rim from 2013.
Oh, God.
I know there's people out there that hate that film, and I know there's people out there that love this film. And to me, and I'm interested in getting your thoughts, Hiro, because I don't remember if I listened to an episode where you did Pacific Rim or not yet. But to me, it fits a certain type of science fiction film. Kind of that ode to, I don't know what films I want to compare it to, but, where you have that big monster type thing. I'm not talking about like Godzilla or anything like that, but where, it's more of like on an epic scale science fiction. It's not necessarily, it's not like your space opera science fiction, and it's not like your time travel. It's just kind of more of a big battle where you have one, the immovable force fighting against the the object, the impenetrable object, or whatever it is. Yeah, that
unstoppable force.
Yeah, I just want to keep butchering like sayings and phrases and
that was an ironic
like a
saying,
tree
right?
and get out of here.
Yeah.
You're like the Biff Tannen right now.
That's just what I'm going to start talking like Biff Tannen. But I enjoyed Pacific Rim. I liked what it was. I thought it was a fun thing to watch on the big screen. I enjoyed most of the performances. I enjoyed the things they created. It wasn't as hard for me to follow action as it is sometimes with those big epic type films where you have no idea what you're watching. Like if anybody saw Jupiter Ascending, I still don't know what happened in any of those fights. So I could at least follow it in Pacific Rim. But Hiro, why do you hate it?
So they hang their hat on Pacific Rim hung its hat on the robots, and they just didn't give me enough robots. So then I think it has the same problems like Godzilla has, where the human characters are all so bad. They're so poorly played. Rinko Kikuchi's horrible. Charlie Hunnam is horrible. Even Idris Elba's speech was just god awful. The comic relief wasn't very good. I mean, just if everything else outside of the robots is going to be so bad, just give me more robots, man. Just get rid of all these humans. Just start doing robots. And then some of the it failed the common sense factor. Like the sword thing. Like you got the sword the whole time, you can't pull it out, man. Like I just didn't have fun with it. It was just not enough fun for me. I wanted tons more. I just wanted less Hunnam, less Rinko Kikuchi, and more robots.
Dan, whose side are you on here?
I'm on your side, Kevin, actually, in this. I mean, yeah, it's not a logical-based movie, but it's a movie about giant monsters fighting giant robots. Yeah, there's
right,
going
but
to be...
within those worlds, you can still kind of adhere to it. I mean, to common sense within the world.
I think it does. I think it does work, and I don't think the people they're nearly as bad as you're making out to be. It's a giant cartoon. That's what it's designed to be. It's designed to be, in the line of those kaiju series back in the day. Those, there's definitely the anime influences are all there, and I think it fits into that world. It's meant to be. I think it's very.
It's meant to be somewhat campy, right?
It completely. Why I like it because it completely recognizes what it is and doesn't shy away from it. Are those characters one-dimensional? Very much so, but I don't think necessarily that's really, it's not just
if Pacific Rim had come out in the 80s, people would not have a problem with it.
It's meant, to me, it's very successful being fun. I don't know, the robots is literally 80% of the movie. There's really not much, beyond that. I think the spectacle is certainly there. And I thought, even in 3D, I'm not a huge 3D fan. I thought it was effective using that as well. So, I feel like if you're not into the type of worlds that Pacific Rim is taking out of, you're probably gonna hate it. But if you are,
I'm all about them, man. I'm all about those worlds. It's just I wanted more of it. I'd love to do a count and see how long the robots fighting each other or the robots fighting the monsters were on the.
There's more robots than there was Godzilla.
Yeah,
I don't think the amount of time really matters. When it comes to it, because if you think about Jurassic Park, for example, the first Jurassic Park, the amount of time that dinosaurs are on screen are about 15 to 20 minutes. The Lost World is about 45, and I think that is where that movie tends to fall apart. And to me, it's engaging. Yeah, I would agree. I think Jurassic Park is a much better movie, and I think that's why, because the characters are a lot more interesting. But I think what works is the time that they do spend there is really effective and really well done. And I think if you just even increase it more, it would be a little tedious and be kind of mind-numbing, which I think is the issue with the Transformers films, where there's just too much of it. And I don't know. To me, I think why I like Pacific Rim over something like Transformers, which I think you can make comparisons there, is that I feel there's more of a wink to the audience. When you pull out the sword and say, this is for my family, I think this movie knows what it's trying to be. I think it's very, it's a grown-up Power Rangers movie in, the best ways possible, but better done. So, yeah, I mean, I get it's not for everyone, but I don't know, I enjoy it, and I think it's really a fun time, so.
Cool. All right. Matt, what side of the debate do you fall on?
The side that doesn't say anything for a bit.
All right. I like that side. That means Hyro's the lone survivor on that one.
The lone, what's the Airheads band? The Lone Rangers or whatever?
That's a reference that even I can't get.
Wow.
All right. So, Hyro, what is a film that is more deserving than Pacific Rim? What's your number 8?
My number 8 is.
You should have put Super 8 at number 8.
Yeah, no. I was just looking at my list. I should have done that. Damn it! I'm so unclever. Actually, I had the same rule that you did, where I didn't want to put two of the same series on my list. Okay. So I chose probably. It's so tough to choose between these two. I have Dawn of the Planet of the Apes from 2014. Nice. I thought that movie was so well done. Both of those movies are much better than they had any business being, or that I had expected, really. I was like, dang it, man. Planet of the Apes, especially after the Marky Mark joint, it was just so bad. And then, I had no expectations going into this. And it was so much fun, such a good movie. Big fan of this movie. Both of them, really.
Somehow not the best visual effects from last year.
What won that?
Was it Interstellar? I don't remember, but it wasn't Dawn of the Planet of the Apes.
It was Interstellar one for best special effects.
Yeah. Nobody should be surprised at this, that I'm going to have to save my thoughts for a little bit later. If you've watched any of our shows, you know what my thoughts are on the Planet of the Apes films. So I will save my thoughts, but I think that's a great choice to have that on the list.
I agree. It pained me great. I really wanted to find a spot for one of those films, but I wasn't able to. But those are really top-notch science fiction films, both of them. So.
Matt.
I didn't get Dawn I didn't see Dawn, rather. And honestly, out of my 17 films, I forgot Rise.
Oh, no.
So
you're
that said,
strike one.
Rise was a solid movie. Probably I don't know. I was going to say less science fiction-y, but no, it's probably more science fiction-y than the second one, honestly, if I had to guess. That doesn't make it a better movie, it just makes it more science-y. I'm sure it's a great choice. I haven't heard a bad thing about it. And the one movie guy at work, almost every day, at least 3 times a week, almost every day, says, "Have you seen Dawn yet?"
So what are you waiting on?
Sitting down with someone to watch it.
All right, name the time and place. We'll put it on. I'll watch that anytime anybody wants to watch it.
Nice.
Love those films. All right, Matt, what's your number 8?
My number 8, I believe suggested by you on Twitter, was Europa Report.
It was. I was asking for suggestions from some films that I hadn't seen, and a couple people mentioned that. I did not get a chance to see it. So, what was your take on it?
So you listed a handful of films, and I went and searched them all up. And Europa Report sounded like the most interesting. It's all like found footage, half documentary, half sci-fi horror, I guess, or thriller. Thriller is probably, which is not a thing I usually go for, and I think I skipped over that word when I started reading it, and I got like 10 minutes into it, I paused it, and I went and reread it, and I was like, oh, it does say thriller. That said, I was pleasantly surprised. It's not very scary. It does get intense in a few moments, but not so much so that I ever had to turn it off. I don't know. Like they made it's about a bunch of people on one starship going for like a 3-year mission or whatever. And they did a really good job of developing very unique characters. They let out information in bits and pieces that jumps around worse than any Tarantino film I've ever seen. But that's just to tell its story in the way it wants to. And it was honestly a lot of fun, and I don't regret watching it at all.
Has anybody else seen this one?
Yeah, I've seen it. I like it. I like the. There's been like this huge influx of like indie science fiction films. Like now that you can do a lot more with special effects without a big budget, so I think it really goes in that realm. It's like that, and like the Last Mission to Mars is around the same time, and which is definitely more horror. But I enjoy it. I didn't really consider it for this, but it's a good time. It's worth a watch.
All right. And what is your number 8, Dan?
My number 8. My number 8, honestly, when I first saw this movie, I was a little disappointed with it. And I think maybe because I had so much hope going into it, because I loved the director's last film, and it was such a long time until this one came out, so there's a lot going into it. And it is one of those movies that you have to, I think, the more I've watched it, the more I've enjoyed it. And it's a movie, I think you mentioned this, Kevin. I think it's a movie you're going to hate. I don't know if you saw it or not, but it's out of Upstream Color by Shane Carruth, who to fame was first coming up with Primer, which was notably a really well done science fiction film. And Upstream Color, it's again one of those science fiction where it's rather light per se, but it's really it's kind of a strange concept in a lot of ways, but it's very atmospheric. It does feel almost a little bit like Terrence Malick, but the imagery is great. Some of the acting, not fantastic, to be honest. Shane Carruth is a much better director than he is actor, so he should probably not act in his movies. But I don't know. It's one that it's kind of just stuck with me, and I just think there's a lot of originality to it, and a lot of interesting concepts that they explore, and there's so much to it that you can't really take it all in one sitting.
I'm not going to hate on that one because it's one that I haven't had a chance to see yet, but I've been told I would hate it. So
really, I saw that movie. I really liked it. I'm kind of like kicking myself that I totally forgot about that one because I thought it was, I watched it and it's a lot of work to watch that movie.
It is
because you have to really pay attention. You have to put the phone away. You have to muff the kids out of the house. Punt the kids. Because you gotta like sit and focus and slow and think the whole entire time, and even then, I still had to kind of do a little research afterwards. Like, oh, okay, I got that, and then rewatched it again, and I was like, wow, this is a really good film. And I think that Shane Carruth really gets off on that, as evident in Primer.
Yeah, he's obviously a really smart guy. I think he's like from MIT. I think he was a graduate from MIT or something like that. I just know he has a pretty incredible degree or what have you. But I don't think it's as good as Primer, but I do think it's as ambitious as Primer, I would say. So
I definitely agree with you about his acting too, man. He's just all right. You're good, man. As a director, brother, stay back there.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. It is, and it's on Netflix. So if you do want to watch it, you can check it out.
All right, I'll have to watch it eventually just so I can either prove you wrong or prove you right, one of the ways. My number 8, I am going to go just to recent times, 2014 film, one of my favorite science fiction films of 2014, and that would be Snowpiercer for my number 8. Did not expect anything from this film, didn't really know hardly anything about this film, just randomly got it on Redbox, brought it home, watched it, and thoroughly enjoyed it. It's got a lot of the elements that you would look for in a science fiction film. Also has some overarching concepts that can make you think a little bit. I like the whole premise of it. I was just entertained throughout the whole thing. So Snowpiercer would be my number 8.
Nice. I do. It's a lot of fun. Let's say I might be considering that for a different list, so that's why I did not include it.
That makes sense, and I know which one you're talking about, so I didn't even think about that. I guess I have another slot in that list for something else now. All right, that brings it back to you, Hyro. What are you starting off here with this round 7?
I went back to 2011, and I have Men in Black 3. I thought that this was the best of the series, and I really was, especially after the second one, I really had low expectations for this. I was almost like groaning when I heard that they were even going to make this. But I thought this movie was really heartwarming, especially, the culmination of the relationship between Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith really comes to fruition here, and I love kind of what they did with it. I thought I had a lot of fun with this movie.
I honestly haven't seen it for some reason, and I enjoyed all the other Men in Black films, and I liked all the casting for this one. I thought Brolin was a genius choice, and I just somehow missed it that year and have forgotten about it since then that I needed to catch up with it, so I can't really comment much. Dan, have you seen Men in Black 3?
Yeah, and it was a lot better than I expected. I remember, Josh Brolin in that is, so much fun playing, giving his, impersonation of Tommy Lee Jones. It's
spot
on.
Really,
yeah, that was really good. But, and then actually, the ending to that was really unexpectedly good, so I do agree. I don't know if I think I like the first one more, but it's light years better than number 2.
All right, Matt, that brings it to you. What's your number 7?
My number 7's Pacific Rim. Giant robots, more monsters than Godzilla. It was fun.
Hyro, you're the lone wolf on that. I'm sorry.
Hey, it happens sometimes. That's why that's why movies are subjective.
That's right, and that's not going to be the first disagreement we have here. Dan, what's your number 7?
My number 7, and interesting, I think this is another movie you can probably comment on that doesn't have much story. It's maybe more spectacle than narrative, and probably its biggest knock, and that is Alfonso Cuarón's Gravity. I thought, if I look at my best theater experiences, this was one of them. Seeing this in IMAX, and one of the to me probably the best use of 3D ever. It actually enhanced the movies in a lot of ways, and the technology they went into making this movie. And I do think the narrative it's a basic survival story, but I think there is a little bit more to it than just that. And I think Sandra Bullock gives a great, one of her better performances. And there are some issues there, but I do enjoy it a great deal. And I think it's one of those movies we talked about, going to the theater, and I think it's one of those movies that makes going to the theater worth it. So,
I'm just going to sit back and let Hyro react.
I think that this movie kind of highlights everything that's wrong about Hollywood, where you could just put flash all over the screen, which the visuals are incredible, probably some of the best I've ever seen, where you could just flash the shiny light and shiny object in front of the audience, and you can just totally forget that there is a repetitive and really almost non-existent plot going on. And it's just... What?
Go ahead.
It's... Michael Phillips from the Chicago Tribune, when he was on Film Spotting, talked about the plot, and he said it better than I could. And he said that it's like the Perils of Pauline, just over and over and over and over. And that's exactly what it was. It's just one event after another after another. It's kind of like watching her play Pitfall, but in space. And it was so devoid of any kind of story, and I'd completely lost any emotion, any connection to that movie. So for me, it was a lot of flash, and I love that flash. It was great as far as visuals go, but after that, it's just a spiral down the toilet for me. So I just really had a bad experience with this. I watched it in 3D, so I did get the full effect of it. But when it was over, I just, my entire row like looked at each other and like, what the fuck was this? What just happened here? Was that it? It was kind of just such a big letdown because I had such high hopes for this.
I don't agree at all that it's just Flash in any way, shape, or form. I think that's a really unfair statement to it, because I think it does. Yeah, does it have a gigantic narrative? No, it doesn't. But I don't know this need people have that a movie has to have a strong narrative. I don't think movies don't have to do that. Like, you read a poem, you don't say, oh no, that doesn't have a story to it, so it's not good. Not all movies need to have a narrative. That's not the point to it. I think there are themes there. Are they the strength of the movie? No, but I think there is certain elements there that go beyond just the Flash and make it more, to say it's just like the Baron of Hollywood. I don't think that's true, because I think it has meaning to it beyond just the spectacle, and I think there is a journey there with that character. So I don't know. I don't think that's necessarily a true reflection on what it represents regarding it not having any type of meaning beyond just the spectacle.
I just didn't see that, man. I mean, you barely she barely introduces the thing about the daughter, and it's barely touched on. So you really don't get into the depths of that character. I mean, you get some imagery of rebirth and things like that, but it's just flashes in the pan in this giant soup of shininess, and I just couldn't connect with it at all.
I don't know. I don't think you need to give every little detail to that story. I think this understanding of where she's coming from and where she's going. I think the open-endedness to that is actually a benefit, because it allows from some interpretation. It allows for some reflection in that, because her story could be a lot of other people's stories where you don't get every minute detail. It's just the idea of losing someone and trying to get over that and the difficulty that goes with it.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's the entire movie is an allegorical representation of getting over grief, and those repetitive natures. Well, that's very much that of grief, is that repetitive nature of trying to get through it. So yeah, the repetitive nature is there, but I think that is regarding just what it's going into. So yeah, I don't think you necessarily get a huge backstory, but I don't necessarily think you need that, because I don't think that's the purpose of it.
I'm not saying that you need the detail to flesh it out or anything like that. What I'm saying is the way I believe, like you're saying that the repetitive conflict or the repetitive perils is the allegory. I just didn't see that at all. I just saw it as another way of showing this great special effects, because you don't need the detail, but you need Sandra Bullock to kind of exude that pain, and I just didn't see it. I mean, she just kind of shies away from Clooney's kind of prodding, and then that's about it. You don't really get any substance out of her. So I guess we'll just have to agree to disagree on that one.
Yeah. I find myself somewhere in the middle. I can kind of see a little of both sides. I wasn't as on board with it as I wasn't as gung ho about it, but I also do think there's a lot of things to appreciate from a science fiction standpoint, and obviously, it is the visual spectacle. I just wanted to sit back and enjoy you guys going back and forth, and then quietly under my breath say that it's my number 7 too, and just let the podcast continue. So, Hyro, what's your number 6?
My number 6 is maybe this one will get a reaction. It's from 2013. It's Elysium. I think that
I would say that is more of a representation of what's wrong with Hollywood, with heavy-handed messages and more visual spectacle than that of Gravity. I think that's as guilty of it as Gravity.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people took this one the wrong way. Yes, of course, Blomkamp has his messages that he loves to hammer us over the head with, but I think that if you kind of watch this movie from a different perspective, where you look at the action first and the adventure kind of on the forefront.
Kind of like Pacific Rim.
with actually delivering on that action and that fun more often than not.
I like Elysium too. I'm just trying to.
Yeah, it was. I think that a lot of people knocked Jodie Fisher. Jodie Fisher. Good night. I'm drunk. Jodie Foster and her accent, and I loved it. I thought that was a nice touch. Because who's to say where our dialects are going to be in 150 years or wherever it is? It's kind of like Daniel Day-Lewis going back in time and saying, where was our accents with Bill the Butcher back in the day. I thought it was just a nice touch. I had a good time with this movie. It was just a fun adventure in the movie theater, and I kind of didn't take much. I mean, I know that the allegory's there, but I didn't really just let that overtake it.
I'm glad you put it on the list. It wasn't quite high enough to make my list, but I'm glad it's mentioned because I think it gets some undeserved hate from a lot of people, and people just want to rip it apart as a terrible follow-up to District 9 and this, that, and the other. And I just don't think it was as bad as people make it out to be. So I'm glad you brought it up.
And in reality, I think that.
Good.
I said in reality, I just had a fun. That's one of those movies where I had such a good time in the theater that maybe that experience kind of helps it along as well.
I think if that was his first movie, it would be a lot more well received. But I think it gets that comparison to District 9, and it's kind of funny that I felt like with Elysium, I wanted more of that visual spectacle because action wise. I think there was a lot of great glimpses here and there, but I would almost want a little bit more. But I feel like it is like the Halo movie Neil Blomkamp was trying to make. Like you can definitely see the influence because he was set up to make that movie, but then it fell through. But kind of got to make Elysium, which was a close second.
The one thing I would have liked on from that is Charlton Copley. It was like, wow, man.
Yeah.
That guy. He's so over the top.
That's for sure. Matt, your number 6.
My number 6 has an asterisk by it because I'm pretty sure it got released overseas in 2009, but was released in America in within this 5-year period. And that's Solomon Kane.
Oh.
I know that Kevin saw some of it with us. I don't know if either of the other two have seen it.
I've seen it.
Half based on really just taking the name from an old story by the original Conan writer Robert Howard. It's, I don't know, like at the beginning of it seemed so slow and so like overdone. Like, yeah, I've seen this fantasy movie a dozen times before, but somewhere like 30 minutes in, even after I'd already written it off, it drew me back in. And that's a quality that I find so rarely in movies, like, because I have a lot of time just making fun of movies. It's probably what I do more than watching them. So the idea of a movie that I was making fun of drawing me back in and getting me interested immediately gives it high props in my book. It had some turns in it. Some of them might be a little obvious, and some of them might be a little silly. But for some reason, like, it really sat well with me when I was done, and I would really recommend it to anyone who likes fantasy movies.
I have not seen it, so I can't comment on it.
I think you saw the ending, because we watched it at your house.
Yeah, it's one of those, I think, that I came in for the last little bit and didn't have a clue what was going on.
All right.
It's been years since I saw it, and I don't really remember much. Just that Pete Postlethwaite was in it, and I saw it around the time he died, and I thought that's about all I can remember.
All right. Dan, what is your number 6?
Oh, okay. My number 6, it is kind of like a throwback to like those classic 80s science fiction films. It felt like it was nostalgic yet refreshing at the same time, and that was Joe Cornish's Attack the Block. It was a big year for like alien invasion films in 2011. There was like a lot that came out that year. And I felt like that was probably one of the best ones. It's just low budget action film, science fiction film where you have these alien creatures crashing into this urban British city. I believe it's someplace in England. I'm not sure exactly, but I love the economy of those two areas, and that was a lot of fun. And the monster design is really cool. It's really minimalistic, where they're just kind of these black creatures with like this neon like mouth that like glows, but it's kind of cool. It's like a simple film that's like I said, it's, if you like those 80s like science fiction films of the 80s, it's like a Goonies meets, I don't know, E.T. or something like that. I'm not sure, but it's a lot of fun.
It's like Goonies meets Critters, maybe.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. Yeah, I enjoy Attack the Block. So, Hire, have you seen it?
I have. It was fun, man. I mean, another one. Dang, man, what the hell list was? My research must have sucked ass because I totally forgot about this one too.
IMDb failed you this time.
I know.
No Diesel Ramos.
I did like the top 200 box office of each year, and so I don't know if maybe this didn't make enough money to make the top 200, but I had a really good time when I saw this. I mean, it was cool. It was definitely something different, and he definitely made the most out of his dollar, especially with that creature design.
That was next on my list of things to watch. I just ran out of time, but it's worth. It was going to be worth it for me to watch it just based on the plot synopsis. I think on Amazon Prime that it listed. It sounds like the most ridiculous, like off the wall premise that you could possibly come up with, and I was all about it. So I would have watched it probably if I had another day.
And Joey Boyega, who was in Attack the Block, he's kind of the star of that. Is going to be he's one of the major stars of Star Wars Episode 7. Right. So.
Yeah,
so I got to see it. Research for Star Wars.
He's the dude who hasn't found shit yet when he's combing the desert.
Yeah, he's the guy who caused all the controversy just by standing up. So
I know,
right? All right, my number 6, Hyro. You can go ahead and plug your ears for this one because you're not going to like it. But as far as trying to fit fantasy into my list, not that was, I had no problem if there was no fantasy films on my list. I could have gone all straight sci-fi, but. This honestly is one of the best fantasy films I've seen in a long time. I know a lot of people didn't like it. It does not have good Rotten Tomatoes numbers, but I don't know if I had too much more fun experiences last year in the theater. Hopefully Matt can back me up a little bit since we saw it together, and I'm going with The Rock in Hercules from last year. I just listened to your episode, Hyro, where you guys ripped on it pretty well. Barry supported it a little bit.
I think I gave it like a 6 or something, or a 5 maybe. I mean, like a passable grade. I had some fun with this.
I like The Rock, and I think this was a role perfect for him, and maybe it was just because I had seen Kellen Lutz try it earlier in the year, like we mentioned, and he just makes it seem that much more great that The Rock's doing it. But I just really like the premise of what the, spoiler alert for people who haven't seen it, mute your, don't listen to it for the next couple seconds. But I like the idea that they were going with the whole, it's not really Hercules that's doing all these things, that he has the team. He's got the Ian McShane is great in this film. I just had fun. Yeah, does it, if you were wanting to, really look at it with a critical eye and pick it apart, are you going to be able to find stuff that's wrong with it? Absolutely. But if you just sit back, have some, popping popcorn and enjoy your experience, you're going to enjoy it, because this is a lot of fun for me. And enough fun that I even put it ahead of some of those other films. So it's all the way up at number 6. I enjoyed Hercules. I think it should have got better reviews. Screw the 58 Rotten Tomato score that it has. Matt, what about you? I know you watched it with us.
So, I'm just going to get this out of the way now, not telling you where it is in my list, but it is on my list. But, it's the closest to a solid Dungeons & Dragons movie we've ever had, even though we've had 3 Dungeons & Dragons movies. Like, it's got the whole party structure, you got your bard, you got your barbarian, like, it's got a great party structure. It's like, honestly, I think one of the greatest fantasy movies ever. Like, if I were doing a top 10 fantasy movies.
Wait, we're talking about Hercules?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
100%.
I thought maybe I had fallen asleep and woke up in a different part of the list or something.
Whatever, dude. Like, I put it up there with the original Conan the Barbarian in a solid fantasy movie. Like, seriously, I can't talk about it enough. It's, I think, the only 2014 movie I've bought on DVD so far. And I immediately...
Dan, did you see this one?
I have not seen it, so I'll say I agree with Hyro. Yes, I don't know.
Well, let me help you out, Dan. It's better than kicking puppies or whatever it was. That was the metric.
That's a good bar to set, I think. But if it's marginally better than The Legend of Hercules with Kellen Lutz, it'll seem
way
like
better than that.
It's way better than that.
Yeah, I actually, I had fun. I mean, it's escapism. It's a good time. I mean, I thought The Rock was really good in this. I mean, is there anybody in Hollywood better suited to play Hercules than this dude? I mean, he's a giant hulk of a man. He's charismatic. He's a good-looking dude. I don't know about the choice of putting the weave or wig on him, and that was kind of weird to see. But it's fun. Like Kevin was saying, Ian McShane was a great time in this. I mean, he was awesome comic relief. But
and what I was glad, even though I was, they do there's a lot of visual effects, and there's some green screen and some CGI stuff, etc. But I think they do handle that in a way that it doesn't become something that's the whole movie's focus. It's more, towards the beginning, it's more in showing kind of the storytelling part of it. So I don't know. I just thought it was a good balance of humor, action, fantasy elements, and just something that you can just have fun with. And I don't know. I think this is one that over time maybe gets a better rap than what it did originally.
Yeah, I could see myself watching this over, like, drinking a beer and sitting on the couch and bullshitting and just kind of throwing it in there.
All right. So that is our top half. So now we're into our top fives for the rest of the way out. And Hyro, you can start off the second half here. What's your number 5?
Okay, this is one of those that I kind of I'm not sure if it fits the category, but going through what the other list that you guys were going to do, I don't see how this would fit in any of those. And it's from 2014. It's Only Lovers Left Alive. So it kind of, it's vampires, and it does have that, like, I guess, fantasy sort of feel to it, because I guess a vampire would fall into that, because it's definitely not horror, but it's this beautiful story about these two kind of old vampires that have been living for hundreds of years and have all this, like, experience and intelligence and kind of angst built up in them. It's just a wonderful performance from Hiddleston and gosh, her name escapes me. Tilda Swinton, who had a great year. And typically you don't think of her as this, like, beautiful person. I mean, she's not an ugly person, but she's very, I guess, androgynous is the best way to describe her. If you've ever seen Orlando, it kind of fits. Ever seen a film called Orlando? It's all kind of old with her in it, where she morphs from a man to a woman, or vice versa. I'm not sure which way she goes, but she's so sexy in this movie, man. I mean, I just found her to be ultra attractive. Like, sitting there eating the blood lollipops or ice cream pops was just like one of the moments of the year for me. So I love this movie.
I haven't seen this one, but I've only heard good things about it, so I'm going to trust you on this one.
That's a great pick. I kind of thought about I didn't even think about it for this list, which is kind of funny, because I flirted with the idea of Let Me In, which was the remake of Let the Right One In, which is kind of the same thing with vampires, but it didn't make it. But yeah, that's a really good pick, because it's a solid film. So.
All right, Matt, how do you start your second half?
With a movie that has not an amazing story and a whole lot of flash. With Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters. I watched this, maybe it's just because it's so in my mind because I watched it a day or two ago, but I don't know, man. When I'm going to the theaters, honestly, that's kind of what I want. Like, it was fun, it was funny, it was interesting, it had enough of a story to be engaging, and I don't know. When you said earlier that if you've seen Hansel and Gretel, you don't need to see Seventh Son, like,
I was just going to say that again.
When I was done with Hansel and Gretel, I was like, why haven't I watched this earlier so I could have gone and seen Seventh Son while it was still in theaters? Because that's, like, how much I enjoyed that movie. I don't know. I loved it, and I will defend it to the end, although it's not, like, the best movie. It was very enjoyable and exactly what I want from a movie.
My girlfriend's seen this one multiple times, and I watched it with her a month or so ago, maybe 2. And yeah, I mean, it's fun, witch hunting and Jeremy Renner, and I think it's an entertaining one. I for some reason didn't even think about it when making this list. I'm not saying it would have made my list, but something that kind of flew over my head.
I guess I kind of feel the same way about that movie as Hyro feels about Pacific Rim and Gravity. But yeah, I just think it's just not a movie made for me, type of thing.
I've got to finish it up. I only watched, like, the first 15 minutes of it, and I don't remember if I fell asleep or what. It was a long day. I had to run, like, a long race or something. So, but I definitely have heard kind of good things about it, and I want to check it out.
Yeah, I would be interested in anybody watching that and Seventh Son and then trying to explain to me what the differences are. Dan, what's your number 5?
My number 5. I had a hard time finding a place for this, because it was, like, up higher, it was down lower. I wasn't sure, and I know it's one that you said you recently rewatched, Kevin, so I'm curious to see where it falls on your list. And that is Christopher Nolan's Inception. I guess, this does have that visual spectacle, but I would say it definitely has. Can't really deny this doesn't have a strong narrative. If anything, it has too much of a story. But it was during that time when Nolan could do no wrong, and I love, like, the concept of it, just the idea, some really, inventive filmmaking all around, some really fun characters too, and it just, I don't know, it's such a unique film in a lot of ways, and I think it helped break out people like Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who was having a career obviously before that, but definitely brought him in. It was like probably the coming out party for Tom Hardy in a lot of ways. And I love like the snow scene, for it's feel very much like a James Bond movie, and it just has all these different little elements that I find. And I went a long time without watching it, and it kind of went down in my mind for a long time. I was like, oh, it's not as good as I remember. But then recently, like around a year ago, I rewatched it, and I'm like, this is a lot better than I even gave it credit for the first time. So, like I said, it was a hard time to figure out where it went, but I ended up putting Inception at number 5.
Yeah, I purposely wanted to rewatch that one because I don't know if I had even seen it since it came out. I either saw it once or twice, like in that first year when it came out, and I hadn't seen it since. So that was one that I wanted to revisit because I didn't want to just be basically, basing my list based on those memories from way back when and just, I really liked it back then, so I'm going to put it really high. So that's why I rewatched that one. And I'll save my thoughts for a few more seconds on that. But out of the ones I rewatched, it was one that definitely made my list. So I'll talk about that in a second. But first, I want to talk about Edge of Tomorrow, which is my number 5, or Live, Die, Repeat, or whatever you want to call this one.
It's good, even though it has Tom Cruise. That was the third title, I guess.
Yes, it's good. Don't judge it based on Tom Cruise or something like that. This was probably one of my biggest surprises from last year, actually. I wasn't expecting much out of it. It was one of those ones where I had a free day and a free opportunity to go to the theater, and I had to decide what was playing. It was playing, and I thought, heck, let's give it a shot, and was very pleased that I did. And this is just everything you want in a science fiction film. I'm going to talk about a film that's not on my list in comparison because I rewatched Source Code. Actually, I watched it for the first time because I'd never seen it, and I knew a lot of people that really love Source Code, so I wanted to watch it real quick to see if it was going to make my list or not. And all I could think about the whole time was that Edge of Tomorrow did the same thing way more effectively in my mind that Source Code was trying to do. Because you have the same situation where you're replaying the same event or, kind of traveling through the same storyline or the same time period over and over and over again throughout the movie. And I feel like Edge of Tomorrow did it in a much more entertaining way and in a much more effective way, and I got a lot more out of the depth of the story, and I wasn't as bored with them doing it over and over like I got with Source Code. Source Code got almost too monotonous for me, and I felt like we went back and played the same time period so many times, but I still didn't get that much of a scope for everything that's going on and all the little details like I did with Edge of Tomorrow. I really enjoyed it. Emily Blunt, Tom Cruise did a fantastic job. So Edge of Tomorrow is my number 5 pick. All right, Hyro, you're up for number 4.
At number 4, you guys mentioned it already, 2012's Looper. I had such a good time with this. I'm excited to see what Rian Johnson does in the Star Wars universe because what he did here with time travel and all that stuff was fantastic. I love this film. I thought it was such a great time. One of probably my top 5 films of 2012.
And I will second that by saying it's also my number 4. So
nice
good choice. Yeah,
and since it was my number 10, I'm not going to complain about you guys having it on your list as well. So,
but yeah, like you said, Hyro, very looking forward to see what Rian Johnson does with Star Wars, and I love the world it creates. It's really kind of kind of dirty, grungy world in the future where time travel is almost like it's not even like something that's kind of cool. It's just like this thing that happens. It's almost like looked down upon and all the little different elements. I also like how it slows down. It takes time. It really like allows the story to really just kind of like it was a challenge because you have a huge pacing issue there, but it really handles it well. I love the scene in the diner between Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Bruce Willis. That was a lot of fun, and just the technology they used. So just a lot of like little small touches, like how it shows time travel. I thought that was really cool because it's really nothing really all that glorious or glamorous. Really simple, and it's really effective. So yeah, I love Looper. I've seen it. It's always on like FX. I feel like, and I tend to watch it and enjoy it more and more. So
nice.
It's one of those films that you don't really hear too many people say anything bad about.
No, it's not much bad to say, I guess. Maybe I don't know. Maybe you can make fun of Joseph Gordon-Levitt and his gigantic head, but besides that,
his weird like prosthetic nose, man. That thing, the nose was a little off-putting for me, man. Even I know what they were going for, but it was just looked so weird on his face, man.
Yeah. And that one scene with like the disappearing like limbs and stuff like that.
Oh,
with
Paul Dano.
That was.
Hey, who was the guy in the like the marshal in the house that he kind of floated up and then he kind of just got.
Geez, I can't think of it. He's kind of usually a comedian. I can't think of his name, but he was like, yeah, he was pretty good. And Jeff Daniels is pretty funny in that. Like, I'm from the future. You should give it a pair. Yeah, it's a good movie.
It's a great film. If you haven't seen Looper, check it out for sure. Matt, since they both gave their number 4, what's yours?
My number 4 is, I have Brave on there, so I couldn't have the list without Frozen on there. I don't know. I don't need to say anything. It's Frozen. It was amazing. It was undeniable fantasy, and I love it. I don't care about your opinion on my list at all anymore.
I have I'll tell you this, man. I have a 2-year-old daughter who is 100% into princesses, brother. If you could feel this pain.
I get that because I've been to parties and it's just like whenever the kids start getting out of hand, just any one parent pulls out their phone and pulls up Let It Go and it shuts down.
Yeah,
it's amazing the power this thing has on little kids.
I have a little funny anecdotal story if you guys indulge me, man. My mother-in-law bought for my daughter like the Elsa dress. And it has like a little built-in like music box attached to the hip, and all she has to do is push the button, and it'll play about 20 seconds of Frozen. The first night she got it, man, it was about 4 hours straight. She would just whack herself on the hip just over and over and over. Oh man, I want to burn that dress.
You haven't yet?
No, I didn't. No, I don't have the heart to do it. It's her favorite.
I'm just kidding. That's right. I'll take the heat off of the Frozen and. Everybody can direct the hate towards me with my number 4. I don't care. I don't care how many people say bad things about this film. I don't care how many people were disappointed with it. I think it's one of the best science fiction films of the last 5 years, so it's my number 4 film, and that's from last year, and it's going to be Interstellar. Again, you get the visual effects, you get the spectacle about it. You also get a lot of stuff to think about. I know a lot of people have a problem with the third act, and a lot of people kind of check out at that point, but I found every bit of this movie fun and engaging and thought-provoking, and Matthew McConaughey can work a spell on you and just make you like anything, I think. So I think that's what I'm going to blame it on. But I think this is something that over time will get a better reputation than what it did from people in the moment. I think it will grow on people, and I think it'll outlast some of these other films that got better reviews. So Interstellar at number 4 for me.
I really want to watch that again. Like, I didn't hate it. Like, I feel like all these movies that are polarizing that people are love or hate, I tend to fall in the middle, like with Birdman. I'm kind of in the middle. And same thing with Interstellar. There's a lot, like, I really like about it, and there's just stuff that just did not work for me. And I also wonder if it was something I just built up too much, but I do want to revisit it, but after the first viewing, it was a disappointment for me.
I can understand it being a disappointment and not living up to. I mean, almost every single person I know had it in their top, 3 most anticipated films of the year.
It was like number 2 for me. I never in my life did I actively avoid seeing trailers as much as I did for Interstellar. Like, only thing I saw was that first one, and I don't know. Like, it was like literally there was a time when it came on in a theater, and I put my shirt up and like started humming to myself, and my wife almost like left because it's like.
But see, I get that, so I get it being disappointed. My problem is not with people being disappointed on it. Like, I get it as much of a pedestal as we put that film on early on in the year, and with the teaser and the Matthew McConaughey voiceover, etc. I get it being disappointed. I get not living up to people's expectations. I don't get the people that are just completely crapping on the film though and saying it's awful and it's doesn't deserve any this, that, and the other. I mean, it deserves some credit because it's not an awful film. You might not love it, and I'm not saying you, Dan, but I'm just saying as a critic, you might not love the film and it might not have lived up to your expectations, but don't take away from the fact that it's still a quality science fiction film.
I'm going to go ahead and hold my thoughts a little further on that one, but
all right. I got someone in my corner then.
Oh yeah.
And like I said, I even get people having a problem with some of the twists at the end and this, that, and the other. But for me, and I get exactly when and why people have a problem with it. But for me, when I was watching it, I did not have the same issue, and I think that's why it worked better for me than some people. So, all right, top 3. Hyro, what do you start with?
And number 3 is, let's see if we can ruffle the feathers here one more time, man. 2014's Lucy.
I know you love this film.
I love this movie, man. I had such a good time. Okay, spoiler alert, I understand the ending might not be... The last 5 minutes of this movie is crap. But everything up to that was so much fun. I mean, it's just mind-numbingly just forget the, like... Forget your logic and forget what you've seen. It's just so much fun watching Scarlett Johansson kick ass, watching kind of like the intercuts that he throws in there with the animals and stuff like that. I love that. My theater was laughing and rolling, having a good time. People were like cheering. I had such a great experience with Lucy, man. I can't wait to see it again.
When Dan, you've seen this. My girlfriend saw it and I missed it, so I can't comment too much on it. It's on my list of stuff to catch up with. But Dan, what do you think?
I like Lucy. I didn't really consider it for this list. When I think of that movie, the line that comes to my mind is the line, I remember what your breast milk tastes like, which is one of the most surprising lines of 2014. I do agree that there's a lot of fun there. I sometimes I think it's I love like the first like 30 minutes or so. Like that's it was really having a lot of fun. I felt like it was really being tongue in cheek in the beginning, especially with the interplaying of the different images of the animals and stuff like that. I guess what I wish it did more of that. It kind of ended up going away and almost becoming a little bit too serious. But I did like it. I tend to like that more than most people. Obviously, not much as Hyro, but I get why people hate it. Like you said, like the last 15 minutes or so, kind of just go a little batshit and crazy.
Yeah, it really falls off. I mean, way the fuck off.
It's it's Luc Besson trying to do real life, it's exactly the way I would expect it to be. It's just kind of crazy.
Yeah, he's a madman, dude. I mean, but in such a good way in this film. I loved it. You know that scene with the breast milk thing.
I like that scene. I'd named that as one of my favorite scenes of the year. But it's just
for me, it was one of the best scenes of the year. Like maybe you could have dropped that one line and it would have added more. But I understood where she was going with it, where Besson was going with that entire thing. So that kind of touched me, like the emotional grip of all those memories coming onto her. Just it moved me. So I just had a good time with Lucy.
All right, Matt, you're number 3.
My number 3 is probably the most out of left field of all of my list.
That's saying something. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Nah, it's fine. I'm all over the place, and that's Robot and Frank.
Nice, I like that movie. Yeah.
I think I was on Amazon Prime. I had watched 2 or 3 movies on Tuesday, and I was like, I need to find something. I just went to the sci-fi and fantasy section and just read the synopsis of everyone that was within the date, and this one was by far the most interesting, so I watched it. For those of you who don't know, it's about an elderly man. He's got Alzheimer's. He's slowly fading. And his son's just having difficulty dealing with him. And my girlfriend works in a nursing home, and so I've heard a lot of these stories, and it's very depressing and everything. Son buys the guy a robot. That's the sci-fi element. To help take care of him and to see him into his twilight years. And then it comes out that this guy used to be an ex-heist man / con man. And then he starts teaching the trade to the robot, and it's just quirky and fun. It's got nice elements of drama, nice elements of comedy, and I don't know, man. If anything on this list I could suggest, it would be that one. Honestly, it was incredibly enjoyable.
What's it called again?
Robot and Frank.
Yeah, I think it's on Netflix too. I could be wrong, but it's a cute film. It's the relationship that builds between Frank. I can never say his name. It's the guy who played Nixon and Frost Nixon, but it's a nice. It's again an example of how smaller indie films are able to get into sci-fi, and it's a good watch.
It sounds like something I have to check out.
Jennifer Garner.
Yeah, I haven't. Yeah. I haven't seen that one either, so I'll check it out as well. Dan, what's your number 3?
My number 3. Sometimes I'll have a movie where I like a lot more than I can rationalize, and that's kind of my number 3. I don't know. I love the film. I have a lot of fun with it every time I watch it. It's and I love what it says about nostalgia and what it's the kind of the benefits and just the takeaways and the negative effects of it. And that's and I'm not even a huge Woody Allen fan. I love some of his films, but a lot of them are blind spots for me. And that's Midnight in Paris from 2011.
Oh, good choice.
for those that don't know, that's when Owen Wilson plays like the de facto Woody Allen character, and he kind of goes back in the past to different time periods in Paris and meets like different eccentric characters in history, and probably the best being Ernest Hemingway, who is just like every time he's on the guy. I feel bad for forgetting the actor that plays him, but every time he's on screen, it just says something hilarious and a lot of fun. So I love the score to it too. Uses Paris in a lot of cool ways, and it's to me it's the best thing Woody Allen has done. I don't know, maybe in a long, long time. And yeah, it's just a lovely film. I love it a lot. So.
Hyro, you said you liked that one too?
I did like it. I mean, it was a very. By the way, Corey Stoll played Ernest Hemingway. Sorry,
thank you.
I was looking it up. But it was such a fun film. Everything, echoing everything you said, man. It's just so. It was a romantic film as well, man. I mean, kind of him kind of getting in touch with himself, and then kind of finding a maybe a better soulmate or a better somebody a little bit better than Rachel McAdams. I had a good time with that film. It was an excellent choice.
Yeah, I do think like Rachel McAdams' character is probably the one downside of that movie. Like her acting is fine, her character is just given really short end of the stick. But yeah, it's just a movie
sticks out. She sticks out really badly, and I understand that she's meant to, but it's almost like she's in a different movie. Like the character is from a different movie.
Yeah, she's a little like the treatment of her character is really harsh. Like it's like she seems very just. Like it's too easy to hate her. I think it would have been maybe a little even better if she was a little bit more likable. You just want him to get away from her, which I think it kind of makes his choice a little easier on the audience.
Right.
But.
Right.
All right. My number 3 has already been mentioned. I said I'd save my thoughts a little bit. Dan, I don't think you're too far off with putting it at your number 5. So my number 3 is Inception. Again, like I said, I rewatched it just to make sure I wasn't living off memories, and enjoyed it just as much, if not more, the second time around. I really feel it held up. A bunch of good performances, like you mentioned, with Joseph Gordon-Levitt, DiCaprio, Tom Hardy, and just a fun way and a unique angle to the whole science fiction genre, something obviously most people hadn't seen before. Almost kind of had that same effect as like something like The Matrix did, probably with a lot of people back, in that time period, where it's just something that was so out of left field and so inventive and creative that it just made it a lot of fun and made it a lot of people's top picks, for that year. I think it was my number 1 film that year when I did my countdown. So a lot to love about Inception. So that's my number 3.
Man, I forgot to mention it the last time it was brought up, but damn it. That was the third one of this list that I wish I would have. I don't know how this escaped me, man. My research really sucked, because Inception is a movie that I really enjoyed. I borderline love, man. Really inventive film. Great acting performances. Excellent pick.
Yeah. All right. So top 2, here we come. Hyro, you're first. What's your number 2?
My number 2 is this is one of those kind of like I was talking about before when we first started the list. Is the sci-fi is kind of almost it's definitely the plot point, but it's definitely not the focus of the film, and it's About Time from 2013.
Nice.
It's a time travel movie with Domhnall Gleeson, Bill Nighy, Rachel McAdams, and the lovely Margot Robbie. And you guys
be careful now.
Yeah, here I go.
I don't want to get it.
Yeah, that's a good pick. That's to me, it's like one of the best romantic comedies since like Love Actually. It's such that's a good movie.
Yeah, I love it.
Honestly, I would have watched this film. It literally was my pick for last night. Was going to be my research pick for my 4th film this week to watch, and I went to see if it wasn't on Netflix. It wasn't on Amazon Prime, and it wasn't on demand. The only way I was going to be able to watch this was by spending at least $12, and I just couldn't pull the trigger on it, so I did not see it yet.
It's on HBO Go if you have that. So
I don't.
Yeah.
It's a very good film. It's definitely one of those things that kind of comes out of left field with the family pain and stuff like that. It's a very father-son movie. I'll leave it at that. But I let me know what you think when you see it, man. I loved it.
For sure. It's on my list. It's very high on my list because you were not the only person that suggested that I see that one. So I definitely got to get that one watched real soon. All right, Matt, number 2.
Number 2, I don't know if you guys can take exception at this one, but I feel like it fits this list because it's kind of sci-fi, it's kind of fantasy more than anything else, and that's Guardians of the Galaxy.
Nice.
It's the only Star Wars movie we got from 2010 to 2015. So I don't know, man.
I only didn't include it because it would be on another list, but yeah, no denying that. So it's definitely one of the most original, like, comic.
Yeah, and it's definitely something I would have included if I wasn't holding it back for a possibility that it might show up on our comic book list. If we were combining those together, it would probably be in there. So no faults for you on that one at all.
Yeah, this is a movie that I have to revisit. The first time I've only seen it once. I saw it in the theater. We reviewed it for our show, and I have no familiarity with this property at all. So like the first hour, I spent really confused trying to figure out the names and get everybody in order because they do have these kind of kooky names like Yandu, Wandu, Randu, Rajan Rondo.
They all have a different color.
Yeah, So but
actually most of them are blue. So
I still had a good time with it. I think that on revisit, I'm going to end up really loving this film, but I just haven't gotten around to it yet.
Actually, one point, I said I think I only bought one movie from 2014. I did buy this, and it was the first one I bought from 2014. I was listening to Kevin Smith's Jay and Silent Bob Get Old podcast, and he was talking about how he was rewatching it again, and how, like, he just couldn't stop crying, and he's trying to get his wife to watch it, who's like, I won't watch any of those stupid movies. And just, like, his touching portrayal of the movie, I had just, like, the second, I might have not even stopped. I might have been driving and just got on my Amazon app and bought it. Like, I need this in my life.
That's interesting. I'm the same way. I'm trying to limit how much I'm buying. So I only bought 3 movies this year. I bought Chef, Boyhood, and the Lego Movie.
Oh, those aren't bad choices at all. Those are great.
No, those are good choices as well.
I've only seen one of them, though.
I'm trying to limit my purchases too. I did buy Guardians of the Galaxy, and I'm trying to remember if I bought Lego Movie. So, all right, Dan, you're number 2.
All right. Well, this is where I need to brace myself because I'm pretty sure I'm going to be alone on this one. Very much so. I think I'm not sure.
At number 2.
I'm not sure what Hyru. I don't think you like this movie, but I could be wrong. I don't remember. But yeah, it's a movie that definitely you guys reviewed on Weekend in the Movies way back when, and you guys did not like it. But I do really love this film, and I just love what it has to say and about celebrity in a lot of ways, body image, identity, and I think there's a lot to take out of it. I love how it does a lot to make you uncomfortable as an audience member with its score or just the way it allows different scenes to play out, and that is Jonathan Glazer's Under the Skin. And again, not one that has science fiction up front. It definitely is a component to it, but this almost like the opposite version of Invasion of Body Snatchers, where you have a person from another planet coming in and trying to observe this world. And I just love how it kind of makes you into an observer, in a unique observer to that of Earth and the way we live. So I get people who hate it. I like when I reviewed this. I did my written review, but when I first saw it, I'm like, this is a movie that I love, but I would pretty much recommend to nearly no one. But it's one of those films that it legitimately is one of those polarizing movies that 2014 had tons of, and this was one I found myself on the loving end. So
I think that if this movie did reach you as it did reach a lot of people, that it's an excellent choice for this list. For me, I didn't hate it. I just think that Glazer, spent a little. There's like, for me, there's like a big dividing line right in this movie. There's the beginning where she's kind of observing humanity, and then there's the second part where she's kind of coming to grips with what it means to be a human, or what it means to be an entity, or whatever it is. I think that they spent a lot more time on the observation and too little time on the second part that I found absolutely fascinating. When she's kind of going through those relationships and those experiences and stuff and trying to be almost a human, I found all that extremely fascinating. Also had one of the creepiest scenes of the year for me, man, the baby scene. That freaked me the hell out, dude. But all in all, I thought especially the beginning was a touch pretentious for me. Like it was a little too much in love with itself, especially that opening sequence.
Yeah, I can definitely see that and agree, and I could see where maybe it does kind of spend a little bit too much time on the beginning part when it comes to like just the observation of the world. But I don't know. I guess what I took what I loved about that was just the way it did it, and just its use of like unprofessional actors, just normal humans, and how like that ties into it. It's kind of, I thought that was kind of interesting, and I like that baby scene, like you mentioned. I thought that it just there's so much going on in that scene, but really just subtly that I loved. So, but I can't really defend the very opening of it. I do think until like it gets to that. Until you see Scarlett Johansson, but yeah, that little like,
yes sir,
I thought that was Jonathan Glazer being like, "Hey, look, I'm like Kubrick." I'm like, "No, okay, settle down."
Right?
And
yeah,
you don't really.
That's exactly what I thought, man.
Yeah,
oh.
I don't think I would think it'd be a better movie without that, like just oblique beginning or whatever they were trying to do.
Yeah, it was almost like a gut punch that I had to recover from. Like, okay, and then start the movie again for me. So, yeah. But I just really found that second half or second third or whatever it was so fascinating, and I just wish we would have gotten a lot more of that.
Cool.
What makes films good is that not everyone loves the same stuff, and we can have debates and discussions.
I did love that score though too, man. I know my co-host Barry hates it. He said it was like a cat jumping on a piano, but I loved it. I thought it worked perfectly for that film.
I like Barry more and more as each day passes.
Like, I didn't have too many problems with that movie, but the score was the worst part of that movie.
I love the score. I'm not gonna lie. I can see why. To me, it depends on what you're looking for a score to do, and I think. Yeah, would the score work effectively outside of the movie? No, but I think when it goes to setting mood and what it's perfect for that, because that feeling that you're getting, I think in a lot of ways that's what it's intended to do. Like it's that offsetting of mood, that making you feel anxious or just like the title says, like your skin feeling out of your skin, like not feeling comfortable. Right. And I think that could make people hate it, but I just found it really. I don't know, engulfing.
I'm not going to put the score on to work out or run in the gym or some shit like that, but it does work with this movie.
I throw it in a haunted house or something like that.
There you go.
The kids.
I'm trying to decide if maybe without the score if I would have enjoyed it more or not, because it literally is one of the biggest things that made me want to leave the room during the movie is the score. Yeah, it was so grating on my nerves. And it wasn't, I understand the mood that it was going for, but it also just made me want to leave. I'm like, I don't want to listen to this anymore. But obviously I hate that film, so whatever. But I respect that a lot of people like it, and I was expecting it to show up somewhere on the conversation, so glad it got a mention for those that love it. My number 2 has been mentioned already, as all my films have been at this point, so I get no... Everyone stole my thunder, but I'm going to do the same thing and kind of cheat a little bit like Dan did and a little bit like Hyro did. Dan kind of included both of the Harry Potter films in one. Hyro, you were somewhat, I think, trying to include both of the Planet of the Apes films, and that's where I'm going with my number 2. If I have to pick one, I guess I'll go Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, but let me throw them both in there because I don't know if a reboot or a remake has been done better than Planet of the Apes has been. And I'm not trying to take away anything from 3 out of the 5 original films, because they obviously have their place too. But man, this is done so well. The visual effects are so amazing, and what Andy Serkis and Toby Kebbell did in Dawn is out of this world. And I don't know, like that's a property that can easily not be taken serious, and it can be seen as just this fantastical. Unreal fantasy type science fiction film or whatever, but there's so many underlying themes in this, in kind of the history of this franchise, and they're touching on a bunch of them here in this recent reboot, and if you look below the surface, there's a lot more than meets the eye with this, and it's easily one of my favorite science fiction fantasy films of the last 5 years, maybe even longer before that, so I'll go with The Planet of the Apes at my number 2.
Nice. Obviously, I agree with you.
All right.
And I still feel bad at not finding a spot for it, but it's, no denying I love those movies. So.
All right, that means it's time for number 1 before we get there, and give everybody a chance to tell us what their number 1 is. We did have a couple responses on Twitter and social media as far as what other people's number 1's film were for the last 5 years, science fiction and fantasy. Not as many as I would have hoped for, but DJ Valentine, he's saying About Time and Her are his 1A and 1B.
Nice.
and since Hiro, you've mentioned both of them, so obviously you guys are in line with that. And Dan, you do have a supporter out there, Andrew Ellington, put Under the Skin as well. So a couple responses there from the Twitterverse. We'll probably get more interaction as we start going through this series throughout the year and try to get some more people's number ones included. But let's get to our number one. So Hiro, what is the best science fiction fantasy film of the last 5 years?
You stole my thunder already, Kevin, man. I'm going also with Interstellar. I understand the last little bit of it kind of does fall apart, like especially with the old lady. I was like, man, that's kind of rough. But throughout this film, Matthew McConaughey had me like kind of choked up with the family aspect of it. I love the special effects. I love the story. I even bought into the gobbledygook about love as like a what do they call it, like an element type of thing. Right. I even kind of, because you can't ignore the fact that humans have emotions, and that aspect and that part of decision making that can't be ignored, and it must be factored in. But I the way they worded it and the way they worked it in, I thought it was fantastic. I love this movie. Even especially the stuff on Earth in the very beginning was fantastic between Matthew McConaughey and his daughter. That stuff was tough, man, especially saying goodbye and then watching the videos and stuff. That stuff was heartbreaking, man. I love this film. The scene with the locking mechanism on the thing, when the whole thing goes quiet.
The docking.
Yeah, the docking sequence. I was trying to avoid saying docking because I always go to the new depths when that pops up. But I loved it, man. I thought that whole film was fantastic.
I will say, if I had to pick out a problem, the biggest problem I had was with the whole love angle that they were going with, and how I get what they were trying to do. I think it could have been handled a slightly different way that wouldn't have angered people or wouldn't have been a contention with some people.
I agree. I mean, it could have been done a little bit better, but I do understand what they meant.
Right.
And I buy their meaning, but I just don't like the execution quite so much. But
I'm with you.
It's definitely something that should be factored in.
Yeah, obviously, I'm not going to have too much of a problem with it since I had it at my number 4. Like I said, I think this is one that later on down the road will be remembered a little bit better than it is currently. But I'm saying that there is a lot of love for this film. I don't want to make it seem like everyone's hating it. Some people in our circle obviously don't like it as much. I know JD and the In Session guys really don't like it at all. I believe, I don't remember if it was first-time watchers or if it was DJ also didn't like it very much. So there are, it's again another somewhat polarizing film, but it does still have good numbers. I mean, it's got a 73 on Rotten Tomatoes from critics. It's got 87 Rotten Tomatoes from the general public. So it's not as hated on as I might make it seem. So great number 1 pick from you. I really love it. Matt, what about you? What's your number 1?
I've already tipped my hand. My number 1 is Hercules. We can move on.
Hey, I support that as the best fantasy. If we were doing straight fantasy, I would probably put that as the best fantasy film of the last 4 or 5 years. But I think there's some science fiction ones that for me trump it, but I have no problem with it being on your list there.
I love it.
And I still have not seen it since the last time we mentioned it, so.
It has been that long. You probably could have seen it in that time period.
It's interesting that Matt found so much fantasy to love in this. For me, I think the closest thing that I came to fantasy was Only Lovers Left Alive. Other than that, everything else was sci-fi, which is
fantasy's where I'm at, though.
Yeah. We'll touch on that here in a second, but real quick, I think Dan and I have to give our number 1s, which I have a sneaky suspicion are the same film. Dan, what's your number 1?
Yeah, I think you're right there, and it was, I think, our number 1 for 2013, and it's my number 1 here, and Hiro is I think you're number 10, if I'm not mistaken, and that's Her. And I know I said, I was looking for a film that, has mostly science fiction, and I feel that is definitely Her. I think it says a lot. I think it's the most thematically rich movie I've seen in a very long time, and I've watched it, it's been playing on HBO a lot, and I tend to watch it every time it's on. And every time I watch it, I think there's something new I take of it. And every movie on this list, I think I could kind of look at and think there's something I can do to make it better, even with Under the Skin, my number 2. But with her, I legitimately think, I think the P word is dangerous, because I don't think any movie is necessarily perfect, but I consider this the closest thing I've seen to a masterpiece when it comes to movie making in a long time. And it's just, I don't know, to me, it says so much, I think, primarily about communication, the way we speak with one another, especially like look at Joaquin Phoenix's job in there, where he's writing these letters. It opens up with him giving this elegant speech, but then you see what it's for, and it's a great introduction into what that movie gets into. So yeah, I love her. So, and then Kevin, I'm guessing you agree.
Yes, I agree with you 100% on your number 1 pick. Her is, like you said, it's as close to a masterpiece as I've seen, and maybe that's what spoiled me for 2014, is that I saw such a great movie to end 2013, and I was hoping the same thing would happen in 2014, and it really didn't until I saw Whiplash recently. That would probably be the closest thing I got to that. But yeah, I still can't understand how Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson don't get any type of love whatsoever when it came to Academy
She got
Award
nominated,
season.
didn't she?
No, she was ineligible because she did not appear on screen.
Ah,
yeah, that was a big to-do because she was just a voiceover, blah, blah, blah. But, yeah, I love her. There's not much to say that Dan didn't say. It was the best film of that year. It's the best science fiction film I've seen in a very, very, very long time. And, Hyro, you had it on your list, so you're obviously in somewhat of agreement there that it's deserving. Not as high as Dan and I had it, but her is my number 1 as well.
I definitely love that movie.
All right, so those are our picks. We're just going to real quick run down the list for you, and then we'll try to wrap this up. I know we've been going pretty long. We're just going to have a quick final thoughts after that. So, Hyro, what was your list 10 through 1, if you have one?
I have her at number 10, followed by Super 8, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, Men in Black 3, Elysium, Only Lovers Left Alive, Looper, Lucy, About Time, and Interstellar.
All right, Matt, what about you, 10 through 1?
Pirates of the Caribbean on Strange Tide. I think there's something it's supposed to be. I think it's Tides with a Z, or S rather. Brave, Europa Report, Pacific Rim, Solomon Kane, Hansel and Gretel, Witch Hunters, Frozen, Robot and Frank, Guardians of the Galaxy, and then finally Hercules.
Dan?
I had number 10, Cabin in the Woods, number 8, Harry Potter and Deathly Hallows, Part 1 and 2, Upstream Color, Gravity, Attack the Block, Inception, Looper, Midnight in Paris, Under the Skin, and for number 1, her.
And mine were Looper, Pacific Rim, Snowpiercer, Gravity, Hercules, Edge of Tomorrow, Interstellar, Inception, Planet of the Apes. I won't say the first part because it's either of them, and her. So real quick, guys, before we conclude our thing real quick, since we're looking back at the last 5 years and the decade kind of at the halfway point, I wanted to get you guys' opinions as we were looking at this, as you were making your list, kind of on the state of the fantasy genre, of the science fiction genre, because one thing I looked at when I was making this list, and kind of going back as far as what I selected for it, I have 5 films on my list from last year, and I have 4 films on my list from 2013. I only had 1 from each of the other 3 years, 1 from 12, 1 from 11, 1 from 10, which makes me kind of, my first thought is that science fiction has been kind of on somewhat of a comeback where we get a lot more science fiction films per year. And then vice versa for fantasy. I mean, we went from a time where we were getting all kinds of Harry Potter films, all kind of Lord of the Rings films, and I felt like fantasy was a bigger presence back then, but maybe I'm misremembering history because it seems like fantasy has almost gone away. Dan, what do you think? Where are we as far as science fiction and fantasy as a genre, and what's the next 5 years hold for it as far as the rest of the decade?
I definitely think it's evident that fantasy is not nearly as prevalent as it once was. I mean, unless you can consider maybe superhero films, which people tend to put in that category. I mean, maybe since the 80s has kind of been down. Not that there's bad. I mean, there's good fantasy films out there, obviously, but they're harder to find. And I think what's good about science fiction is, like I mentioned, is that with it being easier to make special effects, with you being able to do a lot of great things just with a laptop, it's opened up that genre to independent filmmakers really for the first time better than it ever has. Because back in the day, science fiction films done by indie filmmakers tend to not look all that great. But we talked about Robot and Frank. There's other things like Another Earth, which is and a lot of other, like, definitely even something like Snowpiercer, like, you definitely can do a lot more. So I think it's gonna, if anything, just get better, because now you have more filmmakers being able to, you know, make movies that they want to make without having to, like, go through the studio system.
Matt, I know you're a big fan of the fantasy genre, and I know you've been waiting for it to make some type of resurgence. What's the explanation? Because I agree with Dan that because of the ability technologically that we have, you know, science fiction has become easier and easier every year we go forward, and also because of the way that movies are made now, it's like you said, there's more independent, more small budget people that can pull this off. Why isn't it the same for fantasy? Shouldn't it be the same that more people can pull off this fantasy, or does it take something else that we don't have present right now?
Well, I got a couple of ideas. One, I don't know if fantasy is on a downward spiral just over the last 5 years. I think, like Dan said, it's maybe a thing since the 80s. Because I've got a lot of movies from 2014 that were fantasy I didn't have, like Dracula, Maleficent, 300. I mean, that just didn't make my list, but they were there. I think, honestly, one of the biggest things hurting it is fantasy is fantasy is fantasy, and, like, even though you can reimagine and do new things with it, it hasn't changed. And just since the 80s, the amount of technology we've gotten in the real world has, you know, it made irrelevant almost every sci-fi movie from the 80s and before. So you got to keep coming up with new, like, where's the next thing? And so it's constantly invigorated by real life. And I think that makes it easier to write a new script that hasn't been done before because the ideas weren't there before, whereas fantasy doesn't have that.
Hyro, our audiences these days just more adapt to embrace a science fiction film than they are a fantasy film, because we have had some fantasy films like Matt mentioned, but they usually just get crapped on as far as, you know, box office and reviews.
I mean, but really, what have they been offered? I mean, just take a look at most recently with Seventh Son. And one can consider Jupiter Ascending kind of a hybrid of sci-fi fantasy.
Right.
And, you know, outside of the two big properties, the Harry Potter properties and the Lord of the Rings properties, Matt's right. I mean, we haven't gotten really any of these big fantasy films since the 80s. I mean, when was the last time we had anything decent outside of those two? I mean, granted, there is love for Hansel and Gretel and some of those, but, I mean, as far as the larger movie-going audience, there really hasn't been much. I mean, somebody bring back the Never-Ending Story or something, man. Because
I mean, they tried with Clash of the Titans. They tried with Immortals. Yep. They've tried with a bunch of stuff that just has not worked at all.
But those are really not good efforts, though. I mean, they're not putting together. Lord of the Rings is a well-done series of films.
Right.
I mean, Harry Potter, even though maybe I wasn't as high on it, I can step back and look at them and say these are well done as a whole. But those films, the Titans films and that crap, they're just not good, man, on any level.
Right. So if there's someone out there that can put a good effort and give us something, I'm not saying that I don't think that audiences would be opposed to it. If someone would give us something good in the fantasy realm, for some reason it just hasn't worked for whoever's tried it. I don't know if they got the wrong premise or if they do the wrong casting or if it's just bad writing. I don't know what it is, but they have not been able to put it together when it comes to fantasy lately. All right, last thing before we go, because I didn't give you guys a shot, if you want to real quick, without going too far in depth, did you have anything that just barely missed your cut or any honorable mentions that you'd want to throw out there just so they're in the conversation before we close out, Hyro?
Oh well, you know what? Since I don't have that much time, I'll rattle them off real quick because I have a ton of them. You made me boot off the X-Men's, but, you know, the time travel aspect is sci-fi for me. Both of them, I love those films. I have Predators, Daybreakers, the Source Code, The Thing, the remake one, Chronicle, Cloud Atlas, Dread, the Star Trek, World War Z, and Oblivion. Those are my honorables. And they were kind of all just jumbled up.
Yeah, I agreed with you on some of those. I had Star Trek Into Darkness and World War Z on there. I put a thought into maybe including one of the Hunger Games films. In Time, that one gets pooped on a lot, but I somewhat enjoyed In Time.
Is that the Justin Timberlake joint?
Yeah.
That was okay. That was all right.
Yeah, I thought it was a clever idea. I mean, yeah, the execution became a little bit more of a chase and like a chase movie, but I thought that there were some cool sci-fi elements to it. Adjustment Bureau, I liked back in the day. It just wasn't good enough to make my list. What about you, Dan?
I had one was Blackaneves, which I'm probably saying incorrectly. It's a Spanish retelling of the Snow White story that's done in
yes.
It's
Forgot about that one.
silent film. Actually stars one of the people from The Artist, which I would recommend. I think that's on Netflix as well. Grabbers, which I think you would really like that because it's kind of a story where you have these aliens coming and they're kind of like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and they find out the only thing that can repel them is by getting drunk. So it's really kind of like a Shaun of the Dead type of story. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes.
The title screen of that.
Troll Hunter, which is kind of a really interesting film. Melancholia, which I kind of like visually wise, but besides that, not a big fan. I really thought of Prometheus, which I know gets crapped on, but I do like Prometheus. Ruby Sparks, Snowpiercer, Edge of Tomorrow, Detention, Noah. I thought that would fit in the fantasy realm. Robot and Frank, that's been mentioned before. Another Earth, The History of Future Folk.
Damn, how did I forget that? God dang it. I'm
See,
terrible at this.
I'm a dork, and I have a gigantic Excel spreadsheet that I keep track of every movie I watched in categories by genre.
I just started doing that. Started doing that last year. So
there you go.
Another one, History of Future Folk, which is on Netflix. A really low budget film. It's like in Power Rangers meets Inside Llewyn Davis. It's really weird, but it's a lot of fun. The Machine, and that's it. So.
Oh, I forgot my two highest honorable mentions, and you mentioned one of them, which made me think of it. So Prometheus was, I think, my number 11, and The Book of Eli was actually my number 12. I know that one gets crapped on a lot, but I actually enjoyed The Book of Eli. So
I didn't know what category that would fit into, so I left it off just because of that. But that would have been probably would have made my top 10.
Matt, what about you? Anything that didn't quite make your list?
Yeah, I considered, at least just for the joke, putting on Orc Wars / Dragonfire with a Y. Just because it was such a weird pick to watch that one time. I mean, most of the things have been mentioned. The one I would like to talk about is Sucker Punch, which was like, it was 3 worlds, and if they had done 2 of them, any 2 of them, I think it would have been an interesting movie, but the third one just kind of ruined it. And I think that one had so much potential that got really ruined. Also, Inception, I had, because I did see it, but I don't remember being wowed, and now I think I need to go and rewatch it.
Yes, do that, please. I don't know. I think there's so much to pick from the science fiction, and even with the honorable mentions, not a lot of fantasy stuff getting mentioned outside of like Noah and a couple. So, but definitely good mentions by everybody. Hopefully, out of all of that conversation, the people listening, if they're still listening 3 hours into this podcast, will find something that they enjoyed. If not, go to geekcastradio.com. Let us know where we got it right, where we got it wrong. Let us know what your number 1 picks are. We do already have some comments there. People mentioned Gravity, Inception, and a couple other ones on the website already. So if you have any other comments about this episode, go to the webpage and comment there. Remember, coming out this week, we got Chappie Unfinished Business, and if you're looking for DVDs to rent or buy, on Tuesday, Mockingjay Part 1, Breakfast Club 30th Anniversary Edition, and Night at the Museum, Secret of the Tomb are all coming out to Blu-ray. So, all right, Hyro, how can people stay listening to you, and how can people find your podcast?
We're on all the usual suspects on Stitcher, iTunes, Facebook, Twitter. We're at True Bromance Cast. That's True without the E. We're on Facebook, Google+. You can just search True Bromance Film Podcast. You got to throw the film in there to differentiate us from some scallywags from Canada that have that got there first. But yeah, man, just check us out, and we're pretty much everywhere you want to look. So, True Bromance Film Podcast.
And if you guys want to hear some fun movie conversation, I would definitely advise checking them out, adding them to the rotation, subscribing to them, leaving them feedback or reviews on iTunes or whatever. It's definitely worth the listen. They're a lot of fun. So check them out. And thanks so much, Hyro, for coming on here.
Thank you. It was an honor.
Matt, how can people follow you on Twitter?
I am at Fridley Sunt, and I just want to throw one thing in that I didn't get into the news. Adventure Time has been greenlit for a movie, so yay for that.
All right. Dan, how can people follow you on Twitter?
Well, I am at Movie Revolt.
And I am at Optimus Solo. That's it. We're going to close it out here because we've been here forever. So thanks, as always, for joining us here on Weekend at the Movies, and we will see you next week.